From a blind date came a sister who is a CEO. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 451, Distress in the Rain. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu happily agreed. The mountain was not high or steep. The three of them strolled leisurely and climbed to the top of the mountain in more than an hour. On the top of the mountain, looking at the crew below the mountain, each person was like a little bug, which was also a different kind of fun. The three of them were having fun when suddenly dark clouds gathered above their heads, and then light rain fell. It was not very hot during the day at this time. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu did not bring an umbrella. Although the light rain was not heavy, it would have to be soaked if they went down the mountain directly. Su Weifeng hurriedly pulled the two down the mountain. As the saying goes, it is easy to go up the mountain, but difficult to go down the mountain. In addition to the rain, the mountain road will soon become very slippery. Every step must be taken carefully. Boom. With a thunder, the rain suddenly became very heavy, just like pouring. Not to mention Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu. Even Su Weifeng could not see the road under his feet at once. Ouch. Zhao Xiaoshu next to him exclaimed, and his body instantly fell to the side. Su Weifeng hurried to pull her, but Sun Yumeng was also dragged down, and the three of them immediately fell in the direction of Zhao Xiaoshu. Although Su Weifeng was shocked, he remained calm. He tightened his arms and directly hugged Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng in his arms. He stepped hard and soon slowed down. However, this was a steep slope. There was only some grass on the ground, and there was not even a bush. It was quite difficult to climb up. Su Weifeng looked down and felt that it was safer to go down. Hold me tight, Su Weifeng said to Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu. The heavy rain was immediately blown into their mouths by the wind. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu had been hugging Su Weifeng for a long time, and they hugged him even tighter at this time. Su Weifeng put his arms around their waists and slid down again. As long as there was a little protruding stone, it would be enough for him to leverage. Finally, Su Weifeng found a flat place under his feet. He glanced around and saw a protruding rock next to him, which could just block some wind and rain. He quickly took the two of them and hid under the protruding rock. The area under the rock that could block wind and rain was too small. It was less than 1 square meter in total. Su Weifeng protected the two of them inside, and most of his body was still exposed to the rain. Sun Yumeng was the first to see this situation and hurriedly said, "Brother Su, move in a little bit." Su Weifeng smiled and said, "It's okay. I've watered it all. It won't be a problem if I water it a little more." Sun Yumeng said anxiously, No, you'll catch a cold if you do this. Come in." As he spoke, Sun Yumeng directly pulled Su Weifeng in. Zhao Xiaoshu also clung to the cliff and pulled Su Weifeng in. Su Weifeng moved forward a little and immediately stuck to the two of them. The clothes of the three people were soaked and stuck to their bodies. They were nervous when they came down just now, so they didn't feel anything. But now, this situation made them all embarrassed. Su Weifeng coughed lightly and said, "Forget it, I'm fine." Then he took a step back and kept a little distance from the two. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu both blushed, but after looking at each other, Sun Yumeng bit her lip and said, "Brother Su, the situation is special, so don't worry so much. We don't mind." "Xiaoshu, don't you think so?" Zhao Xiaoshu nodded quickly and said, yes, of course I don't mind. Last time, Su Weifeng and she almost had that kind of thing happen. Now, of course, she really doesn't mind such physical contact. Su Weifeng was still a little hesitant, but Sun Yumeng directly pulled Su Weifeng in, and she and Zhao Xiaoshu immediately hugged him. Su Weifeng was really embarrassed to hold two little beauties in his arms with his clothes still so wet. Zhao Xiaoshu was better, but Sun Yumeng's face flushed after a while, and she tilted her head, not daring to look at Su Weifeng. Sun Yumeng and Su Weifeng have been in this company for quite some time. How could she not know how much Su Weifeng took care of her? Su Weifeng was everywhere in her family's difficulties and work. How many times did she dream at midnight, and Su Weifeng's shadow was in her mind. But she always kept her duty, and didn't dare to show any feelings to Su Weifeng. She couldn't be an ungrateful person and couldn't do anything to let Lin Zhuangxuan down. Even though she knew that Su Weifeng's real wife was Qiao Yushan, this was the first time she had such close contact with Su Weifeng. She only felt her heartbeat getting faster and faster. Her heart was getting more and more chaotic. Her body was getting hotter and hotter, but her legs and feet were getting weaker and weaker. If she hadn't hugged Su Weifeng, she would have been unable to stand at this time. Zhao Xiaoshu originally had special feelings for Su Weifeng, and she bravely expressed them once, although she later realized that she shouldn't do this and suppressed these feelings. But in this situation, the feelings in her heart once again burned up, and they burned more and more vigorously, so that she couldn't control herself at all. Her hands hugged Su Weifeng tighter and tighter, and her head was also on Su Weifeng's chest, her little face gently rubbing Su Weifeng's chest. The breathing in her mouth became heavier, and she also made a sound of a kitten's humming. Su Weifeng didn't have any ideas at first, but holding two beauties like this, especially the shy appearance of the two little beauties, slowly ignited the fire in his heart. Brother Su. Zhao Xiaoshu was the first to notice Su Weifeng's changes, raised her head, and looked at Su Weifeng, and it was even more difficult to control herself, arching in Su Weifeng's arms. This was even more life-threatening for Su Weifeng. This kind of stimulation, any man, I'm afraid it would be difficult to restrain, and his hands could not help but move more. After getting Su Weifeng's response, Zhao Xiaoshu was even more excited and became bolder. As soon as he raised his head, he gave Su Weifeng a kiss. Su Weifeng's head buzzed, and he couldn't think of anything at this time. He just responded to Zhao Xiaoshu. Sun Yumeng felt the strange voice, took a look subconsciously, and then couldn't move her eyes away. Su Weifeng and Zhao Xiaoshu kissed in front of her, and Su Weifeng's hand was still on the back of her hand. Sun Yumeng was really confused. She didn't know how to face the situation at this time. She didn't know whether she should escape or stay here. When Su Weifeng kissed her lips, her brain was already blank. The scene that she had dreamed of so many times actually appeared at this time. It was raining heavily outside, and the air was getting colder and colder, but under this big rock, the temperature was getting higher and higher, and hotter. Chapter 452 Confused. After an unknown amount of time, Sun Yumeng suddenly pushed Su Weifeng away. This time, Su Weifeng was pushed out all of a sudden, and the heavy rain immediately poured down on his head. The coolness instantly extinguished Su Weifeng's fiery emotions. Looking at the flustered and shy Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu under the big rock, Su Weifeng was stunned. What happened to him? How could he do such a thing to Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu? This was simply like a beast. Raising his hand, Su Weifeng slapped himself directly. The sound of this slap was so crisp and pleasant that it echoed under the big rock. Ah! Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu both exclaimed, and then they worked together to pull Su Weifeng back under the big rock again. Brother Su, what are you doing? Zhao Xiaoshu raised his hand and rubbed Su Weifeng's cheek, questioning with tears in his eyes. Su Weifeng sighed and said, Xiaoshu, Yumeng, I'm such a bastard. I just did such a bastard thing to you. I really. Zhao Xiaoshu hurriedly said, Brother Su, this is not your fault. We did it voluntarily, Yumeng, don't you think so? Sun Yumeng didn't blame Su Weifeng at all. It was just that she suddenly became rational and pushed Su Weifeng out. She blamed herself more. When she saw Su Weifeng slapping himself in self-blame, she had already replaced everything with heartache. With red eyes and tears in her eyes, Sun Yumeng choked and said, Brother Su, I also volunteered. It's really not your fault. We seduced you. Su Weifeng felt even more guilty and said, Yumeng, Xiaoshu, you don't have to comfort me. This kind of thing is absolutely my responsibility as a man. Zhao Xiaoshu was panicking at this time. She didn't know how to persuade Su Weifeng, so she had to look at Sun Yumeng for help. Sun Yumeng took a deep breath, then buried her head in Su Weifeng's chest, and said softly, Brother Su, I really can't help myself. I have fallen in love with you unknowingly, but I have been suppressing my emotions. I can't do anything to let President Lin down. Just now, I feel very happy to be able to kiss you. Although this happiness is short-lived, I'm really content. I'm content with such a short moment with you in my life. Zhao Xiaoshu nodded repeatedly and said, yes, I feel the same way. Su Weifeng smiled bitterly and said, the more you say this, the more I feel like a bastard, and I'm sorry for you. Sun Yumeng suddenly raised her head, showing a sweet smile, and said, Brother Su, just think of us as a dream. When you wake up, you are still you, we are still us, we are still the two little girls in the company, and you are still our President Su. We will never let this happen again, nor will we cause you any trouble. Zhao Xiaoshu nodded again and said, Brother Su, this time it was really a special environment. The special atmosphere caused the result just now. We all know what we should do, and what we have done. Brother Su, you must not take this matter to heart. This. Sun Yumeng chuckled and said, Brother Su, why are you more upset than us? This kind of thing should not be something that we girls should be entangled with. Why are you, a grown man, still entangled with it? Su Weifeng laughed dryly and said, I really can't think it through. Zhao Xiaoshu chuckled and said, Brother Su, when you say that, I feel like the two of us are stronger than you. Su Weifeng chuckled and said, now that you put it that way, it seems that it is true, that I'm too hypocritical. Zhao Xiaoshu smiled even more brightly and said, really, so Brother Su, don't think about it. When we get down the mountain, we will just pretend that nothing happened. Su Weifeng shook his head gently and said, if you all think so, then I will be a scumbag for once. Zhao Xiaoshu narrowed his eyes, looked at the heavy rain outside, and said, it seems that the rain will not stop for a while. Sun Yumeng nodded and said, it seems so. Then the two looked at each other, and shame surged on their faces. Zhao Xiaoshu bit his lip, looked up at Su Weifeng, and said, Brother Su, since you have already been a scumbag, it doesn't matter if you continue to be a scumbag for a while. As he said that, Zhao Xiaoshu took the initiative to offer a kiss again. While Su Weifeng was hesitating, he had no chance to refuse. He suddenly thought it through. Anyway, he had already been a scumbag just now. No matter what happened now, he could not save the consequences of this scumbag, so he simply let go and hugged Zhao Xiaoshu tightly. When the heavy rain outside turned into raindrops, the three of them calmed down. This time, Su Weifeng took the initiative to stop. He was afraid that, if it continued like this, he would really take the next step. Sun Yumeng was still shy, but Zhao Xiaoshu had already let go. She chuckled and said, Sister Yumeng, is this your first kiss? Sun Yumeng blushed and nodded gently. Zhao Xiaoshu stuck out her tongue and said, I'm so sorry, your first kiss, but I got half of it. Sun Yumeng hurriedly said, it's nothing, I also feel pretty good. Zhao Xiaoshu chuckled and said, it's because Brother Su has good skills. It was my first kiss last time too. I was afraid that the kiss wouldn't go well, but Brother Su led me, and I didn't feel awkward at all. Su Weifeng couldn't help but smile and said, are you praising me or insulting me? Zhao Xiaoshu said playfully, of course I'm praising you. Sun Yumeng immediately nodded. Su Weifeng scratched Sun Yumeng's nose and said, Yumeng, you've been led astray by Xiaoshu. Sun Yumeng was so shy that she didn't know what to do. Zhao Xiaoshu pouted and said, Brother Su, I'm a bad girl in my heart. Su Weifeng chuckled and said, of course not, it's just that you are bolder than Yumeng. I think if you weren't here today, and if it weren't for this special situation, Yumeng would never have done this with me in her life. Zhao Xiaoshu shook his head and said, that's not the case. The more Sister Yumeng suppresses herself like this, the stronger it will be when she explodes. Maybe when she explodes, she will go to bed with you directly. Sun Yumeng was embarrassed and said, no way, don't talk nonsense. Didn't you want to go to bed with Brother Su last time? Now you're blaming me. Zhao Xiaoshu was not embarrassed at this time. Instead, he said with some resentment, yeah, it's a pity that it didn't succeed that time. If it had succeeded, I would have no regrets in my life. Sun Yumeng spat at Zhao Xiaoshu, but her heart couldn't help but follow this line of thought. If she could have that kind of thing with Su Weifeng, would she really never regret it for the rest of her life? Chapter 453. Let's confess. The rain finally stopped. The three of them looked at the scenery outside the stone after the rain, and they were all a little silent. Zhao Xiaoshu took a breath and said, let's go. If we don't go back, General Manager Lin and the others will be worried. Sun Yumeng also nodded. Su Weifeng, Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng found the mountain road and walked down the mountain again. Su Weifeng thought the atmosphere would be awkward. But after walking on the path, Zhao Xiaoshu began to chatter like a happy bird. Sun Yumeng was a little unnatural, but under Zhao Xiaoshu's leadership, she quickly recovered. Obviously, neither of them wanted to burden Su Weifeng. Su Weifeng sighed in his heart, feeling that this debt of love seemed a little difficult to repay, but in order not to worry them, he pretended that nothing had happened and talked and laughed with them. The three people's clothes were a little exposed, and Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu's slightly covered appearance was even more moving. The sky cleared up after the rain, but the air in the mountain was still very humid, and the three people's clothes would not dry for a while. When they reached the foot of the mountain, Su Weifeng and the other three bypassed the crew and went into the room they rented from their fellow villagers. Girls like to be clean, and the two of them brought clothes with them this time and went inside to change clothes, while Su Weifeng waited for them outside. He took off his coat, bare-chested, and wrung out the moisture on his clothes. Lin Zhuangxuan walked in from outside. Lin Zhuangxuan asked, "You guy, it was raining so hard, and you still went up the mountain with two little girls. Is everything okay?" "Nothing happened. We found a small cave to shelter from the rain, but our clothes are still wet." Lin Zhuangxuan narrowed his eyes and said, "The clothes are all wet." Su Weifeng immediately knew what Lin Zhuangxuan was referring to. He coughed lightly and said, "It's raining so hard, how can the clothes not be wet?" Lin Zhuangxuan said casually, "Yeah," and then hiding in a small cave, accompanying two little beauties whose clothes were wet, a big pervert didn't do anything. Su Weifeng was so guilty, and hurriedly said, "How is this possible? Even if I want to, Xiaoshu and Yumeng will not agree." Lin Zhuangxuan rolled his eyes at Su Weifeng with contempt, and said, "Forget it. Even if Zhao Xiaoshu's feelings for you are temporarily suppressed, you can't say when it will explode. I'm more relieved about Yumeng." Su Weifeng was sweating in his heart. This time, Sun Yumeng, who you were relieved about, also cheated. However, Su Weifeng would never admit such a thing. It was not just his problem, but also involved Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng. He quickly changed the subject and said, "Why are you here? Aren't you going to shoot today?" "Change the subject." Lin Zhuangxuan snorted and said, "I saw that you haven't come back yet, so I'm a little worried about you. I know Zhuangxuan cares about me the most." Su Weifeng flattered him. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu both changed their clothes and came out. When they saw Lin Zhuangxuan, they greeted him, but their expressions were somewhat unnatural. Lin Zhuangxuan smiled slightly and said, "I just came to see you. If you are all okay, I'm relieved." Sun Yumeng was even more apologetic and said, "Boss Lin, we made you worry." This apology was not only for this reason, but also, mainly because of what happened with Su Weifeng. Lin Zhuangxuan still had a smile on her face, and said, "But I really don't have to worry so much. With your big brother Su here, no matter how big the problem is, he can keep you safe." "Okay, I'll go to continue filming. The script should be revised this time. If you don't have anything to do, you can go back." After saying that, Lin Zhuangxuan waved her hand and walked out. Su Weifeng immediately followed and said, "I'll stay here with you." After walking out of the courtyard gate, Lin Zhuangxuan suddenly reached out and pinched the soft flesh on Su Weifeng's waist and said viciously, "Look at the appearance of these two little girls. You must have done something bad." Su Weifeng pretended to be in pain, gritted his teeth and said, "This is indeed a bit embarrassing. After all, I have to protect their safety, and the mountain road is not easy to walk." Lin Zhuangxuan pinched again, then let go, and said, "Humph, then you have to dare too." Su Weifeng hurriedly said, "Don't dare, don't dare. I don't dare to do anything to you. How can I dare to do anything to others?" Lin Zhuangxuan rolled her eyes at Su Weifeng. She still trusted Su Weifeng very much on this point. Otherwise, how could she be a virgin now? Lin Zhuangxuan's attitude also eased a little. She said, "You should go back too. There are still some things to deal with in the company. The company cannot be without someone in charge." Su Weifeng breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Okay, then I'll take them back." Lin Zhuangxuan glared at Lin Zhuangxuan again and said, "Well, go back and be honest. Don't think that you will start to have fun just because I'm gone." Su Weifeng glanced around, tilted his head, and kissed Lin Zhuangxuan on the cheek, and said, "I'm still waiting for you to go back. I'm alone every night, and I'm very lonely." "Huh, you wishful thinking. I'll stay out for a few more days." Lin Zhuangxuan said so, but there was still a sweet smile on her face. The two of them were a little bit sick of each other, and Lin Zhuangxuan returned to the set. Su Weifeng took Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu into the car. Sun Yumeng immediately asked nervously, "Boss Lin didn't say anything, right?" Zhao Xiaoshu immediately said, "We were a little nervous just now. I'm afraid Boss Lin will think too much." Su Weifeng coughed lightly and said, "It's nothing. You don't have to think too much." Sun Yumeng was still relatively innocent. She let out a long sigh and said, "I'm really worried to death. I'm really guilty. I will never do this kind of thing again. I really can't face Boss Lin after doing something bad." Zhao Xiaoshu was startled and said, "You don't want to leave the company, do you?" Sun Yumeng bit her lip and said, "I'm afraid I can't bear the condemnation of my conscience." Zhao Xiaoshu quickly grabbed Sun Yumeng's arm and said, "Sister Yumeng, you must not think like that. Boss Lin is so good to you and trusts you so much. If you leave the company, it will definitely be a great loss to the company." Sun Yumeng smiled bitterly and said, "But I feel like I really can't face Boss Lin normally in the future." Su Weifeng had never thought that Sun Yumeng would be under such great psychological pressure, which further demonstrated the kindness of this girl. After thinking for a while, Su Weifeng took a deep breath and said, "How about, let's be honest with Zhuangxun." "Ah." Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu both cried out. Chapter 454 Confess? No, no. This is absolutely not possible. Zhao Xiaoshu shouted immediately. If Ms. Lin knew about this, she would definitely be angry. "I promised last time that I would never have any thoughts about Brother Su again, but I didn't do it. Ms. Lin will definitely think that I'm a villain who doesn't keep his word." Sun Yumeng bit her lip, but said firmly, "No, I think Brother Su is right. We did something wrong, so we must take responsibility for this mistake and face it directly instead of avoiding it." Zhao Xiaoshu said anxiously, "Are you stupid? We can be honest about other mistakes, but how can we be honest about this kind of thing? We promise that such a thing will never happen again in the future. As long as we don't say it, Ms. Lin won't know." Sun Yumeng shook her head firmly and said, "No. Even if others don't know, I can't bear it. If I know it, I will feel like a thief for the rest of my life." Su Weifeng smiled at this time and said, "Okay, don't argue with the two of you. I think Yumeng is right. Some things should be faced calmly. This matter itself is not your fault. You are so young and have no emotional experience, so you can't control your emotions. This is completely normal. My fault is that I didn't control myself well. I believe that if I tell this story, Mr. Lin won't really be angry with you." Zhao Xiaoshu smiled bitterly and said, "Yumeng is the first time, but it's the second time for me. This is a habitual offender. Mr. Lin will definitely not forgive me." Su Weifeng said calmly, "Third time is better than the last time. This is only the second time. There is always a chance to forgive." Zhao Xiaoshu slumped down in the chair weakly and said, "Okay, if you insist, I can only agree." Alas. After making this decision, Sun Yumeng breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Are you afraid that you can't cooperate with the company in the future?" Zhao Xiaoshu smiled bitterly and said, "That's not the case. I have such an opportunity and I have taken so much money. It is definitely enough for me to finish college and even go to graduate school. I just..." Looking at Su Weifeng in front of him, Zhao Xiaoshu said softly, "I just feel that I can't see Brother Su so easily in the future, or even see Brother Su again in the future, so I feel uncomfortable." Sun Yumeng said with a stern face, "Xiaoshu, your starting point is wrong. You can't have any illusions about Brother Su anymore, otherwise something will happen in the future." Zhao Xiaoshu said unconvinced, "Then you don't have any illusions about Brother Su?" Sun Yumeng said firmly, "I admit that I like Brother Su, but my love is to see him happy, not to be with him, and not to make him feel any burden." Su Weifeng suddenly remembered a sentence. "If you are well, I will have a sunny day." This seems to be a sublimation of feelings. "Yumeng, thank you." Su Weifeng said this very emotionally. Sun Yumeng hurriedly said, "Brother Su, I have already caused you a lot of trouble, and I feel very guilty about you." Su Weifeng parked the car on the side of the road and turned around. His eyes swept over the faces of Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu, and then he smiled and said, "You really don't need to have such great psychological pressure. Actually, Zhao Xiaoshu immediately said nervously, actually, what is it? Su Weifeng smiled slightly and said, actually, I can't be with Zhuangsun. Sun Yumeng immediately said, ah, yes, your wife is Qiao Yushan. Zhao Xiaoshu was a little confused. Sun Yumeng immediately said, Brother Su's wife is Qiao Yushan, and President Lin is Qiao Yushan's cousin. The two are like twins, and look exactly the same. President Lin and Brother Su just say that they are a couple in the company for the convenience of work. Zhao Xiaoshu's eyes widened, feeling that this matter made her brain a little insufficient. The smile on Su Weifeng's face became even deeper, and he said, actually, Qiao Yushan is not my real wife either. We are just fake identities. What? This time even Sun Yumeng screamed. Su Weifeng said, I'm an army officer, your big brother Su. I'm back just to recuperate, because of an injury. After I recover, I'll return to the army soon. It happens that Qiao Yushan's parents are urging her to get married, and my parents are also anxious about this major event in her life. So we too deliberately staged such a scene, so that we can both do our own things. Sun Yumeng said doubtfully, then returning to the army will not affect your getting married. Su Weifeng shook his head and said, my unit is special. Once I go back, I'll be doing special tasks. It's normal to have no news for a year or two. Under such circumstances, it would be irresponsible for me to marry anyone. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu looked at Su Weifeng in amazement. Su Weifeng smiled slightly and said, so whether it's Qiao Yushan or Lin Zhuangsun, this is just an illusion. They are not my real girlfriends, so you don't need to have such a heavy psychological burden in your hearts. Zhao Xiaoshu's eyes suddenly turned a few times and said, then, does it mean that we are still okay? Su Weifeng stretched out his hand, tapped Zhao Xiaoshu on the head lightly, and said, what are you thinking about? Just because I'm special, I'm not suitable for finding a girlfriend at all. I can't do anything. Sun Yumeng looked at Su Weifeng and said worriedly, will you be in danger in the future? Su Weifeng felt warm in his heart. No matter what time, Sun Yumeng, this girl, always thinks of him. Su Weifeng nodded and said, there is definitely danger. I don't even know when I will die, and no one knows about it. Do you think I have the qualifications to find a girlfriend or get married? Brother Su. Sun Yumeng's voice trembled a little and said, you must protect yourself. Su Weifeng chuckled and said, your brother Su is not so easy to die. Over the years, I have carried out countless dangerous missions, but I'm still alive and well here. Zhao Xiaoshu reached out and grabbed Su Weifeng's hand at this time and said nervously, brother Su, can you not go? I just hope you can live well. Su Weifeng shook his head gently and said, I can have what I have today, and all of this is cultivated by the country. I can't forget my roots, and the country needs me, so I must be at the forefront. Without us fighting on the front line, you can't enjoy a peaceful and tranquil life. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu's eyes suddenly turned red. They only now realized that the big brother Su in front of them was not just a warm-hearted man, not just a big brother worthy of reliance, but also a hero who shouldered great responsibilities. Chapter 455 figured it out. Su Weifeng had told Qiao Yushan and Lin Zhuangsun about his own affairs. They were the people he had the best relationship with. Now he told Zhao Xiaoshu and Su Yumeng because he regarded them as the people he had the best relationship with. Of course, there was another reason. Sun Yumeng's strong sense of guilt was also the reason why he wanted to speak out. He didn't want this simple-minded and cute girl to become depressed and live in self-blame every day. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu held Su Weifeng's hands tightly, as if Su Weifeng would go to the battlefield if they loosened their hands. Su Weifeng shook their hands and said, okay, this is my secret. I don't tell others easily. You are one of the few people who know my secret. You can't spread it to others, especially my parents. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu nodded like chicks pecking at rice. Su Weifeng smiled again and said, now that we have talked about it, do you feel less burdened? He especially looked at Sun Yumeng. Sun Yumeng bit her lip and said, my burden is lighter, and I figured out a problem. What's the problem? Su Weifeng asked with a smile. Sun Yumeng's eyelashes flickered twice in embarrassment and said, I didn't understand before. Since you married Qiao Yushan, why are you still so close to General Manager Lin? Now I understand. In fact, you like General Manager Lin. Su Weifeng laughed and said, so you always think I'm a scumbag? Sun Yumeng said shyly, no, I just feel that what Brother Su did is not appropriate. Su Weifeng laughed again. But, Sun Yumeng said again, I feel that we still have to admit our mistakes to General Manager Lin. Before you went to the army, General Manager Lin was your girlfriend. Zhao Xiaoshu opened her mouth, but finally did not raise any objections. In her heart, she still had different opinions from Sun Yumeng. Since Su Weifeng couldn't be with Lin Zuangsun, why should they admit their mistakes to Lin Zuangsun? They should even feel at ease with what Su Weifeng said. Su Weifeng said, go ahead, just like Yumeng said, Zuangsun is still my girlfriend, I must respect her. Turning around, Su Weifeng started the car again. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu sat in the back, but they seldom spoke. They were obviously worried. What Su Weifeng said was still a big shock to them, and they still had to digest it well. The car stopped at the gate of Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng's community, but Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu did not get out immediately. Su Weifeng turned his head and looked at the two of them, smiled slightly, and said, what's the matter? Do you still want me to treat you to dinner? Zhao Xiaoshu burst out laughing and said, okay, if Brother Su is willing to treat me, I would be happy to have dinner with you. Sun Yumeng bit her lip and said, Brother Su, then how about I treat you to dinner? Treating me to dinner? Okay. Su Weifeng agreed with a smile. Sun Yumeng blinked her eyes and said, I won't treat Brother Su to dinner outside, but to eat at our house. I will cook for Brother Su. Su Weifeng hesitated for a moment and said, why don't you come to my house? My house is spacious, and you can also come to my house as a guest. You haven't been to my house yet. Okay, okay. Zhao Xiaoshu shouted happily. After a while, the three of them arrived at Su Weifeng's house. Opening the door, Su Weifeng smiled and said, welcome two little beauties to my humble home. After Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng went in, their eyes were somewhat insufficient. Zhao Xiaoshu said, Brother Su, your house is so luxurious. Su Weifeng smiled and said, these are all prepared for my parents. If I just say I will buy them, they won't want them, so I can only say I will buy them for me first. When I leave, they will have to move in. Sun Yumeng said, Brother Su is really a filial person. Su Weifeng smiled and said, I'm going to change my clothes. You guys can do whatever you want. There are ready-made things in the refrigerator. My mother will come over to replenish them when she has nothing to do. Back in the bedroom, Su Weifeng sent a message directly to Lin Zuangsun, telling Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng that they were also here. Lin Zuangsun replied after a while, just sending a picture of white eyes and 3 words. Be honest. Su Weifeng chuckled and did not reply again. After talking with Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu today, he suddenly felt relieved. Recently, Su Weifeng has been spending all day with Lin Zuangsun, and he almost forgot his identity. This time, he reminded himself that no matter how good his relationship with Lin Zuangsun is, there must be a limit. He cannot indulge in it, otherwise he will be unable to extricate himself. When he went downstairs, Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu were already busy in the kitchen. Sun Yumeng was the chef and Zhao Xiaoshu was helping. Su Weifeng had nothing to do, so he went to sort out some ways to exercise his physical fitness. This was prepared for Feng Baoer. He directly chose Long Zio's training method, which is not something that ordinary people can bear. If Feng Baoer can really stick to it, then Su Weifeng really doesn't mind teaching her well. But if she can't stick to it, Su Weifeng doesn't need to waste time on her anymore. He sent these things to Feng Baoer. After a while, Feng Baoer replied to the message. Are you sure you are not teasing me? Su Weifeng only replied with these 2 words. Another half minute later, Feng Baoer sent another message. Okay, I'll try. I won't let you look down on me. I can do it. I hope so. Since he had the idea of teaching Feng Baoer, Su Weifeng's attitude towards her was completely impolite. Everyone in his Long Zio team said that Su Weifeng was a devil coach. If you fool around with me, I won't be serious with you, but if I'm serious, you won't have the capital to fool around with me. Brother Su, come over for dinner. Zhao Xiaoshu ran over excitedly and called Su Weifeng. Okay, let me taste the cooking skills of these 2 little beauties. There were already 6 dishes and a soup on the table, and the aroma was tangy. Su Weifeng couldn't help but praise. Not bad. Yumeng's cooking skills are so good. Zhao Xiaoshu immediately said, yes, I've been living with Sister Yumeng in the past few days, and I found that I've gained weight. I'm scared. If this continues, I'll become a little pig in no time. Su Weifeng laughed and pinched Zhao Xiaoshu's face, and said, even if it's a little pig, our Xiaoshu is still beautiful. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu were both stunned. They were obviously surprised and unexpected at Su Weifeng's frivolous action. Chapter 456 Qiao Yushan is back. Su Weifeng also felt that his action was inappropriate, but his mentality now was different from that of today. He chuckled and said, why are you looking at me like that? I treat you as my sisters now. As a brother, if I pinch your face like this, you won't scream molest, right? Sister. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu were both stunned. A deep smile soon appeared on Sun Yumeng's face, and she said, I'm willing to be your sister for life. Zhao Xiaoshu also chuckled and said, of course, you can do whatever you want in the future. Su Weifeng laughed and said, no more pinching now, I'd better try Yumeng's cooking first. After tasting them one by one, Su Weifeng immediately praised her and said, Yumeng's cooking is really good. Whoever marries you will be so happy. Sun Yumeng's eyes narrowed into slits with joy, and said, if Big Brother Su likes it, I will cook for you often. Zhao Xiaoshu chuckled and said, now you are Mr. Su's sister. If you come to cook for him in the future, I'm afraid Mr. Lin will agree. It's a pity for me that I have to eat alone at home in the future. Su Weifeng chuckled and said, just come over and eat and drink. Zhao Xiaoshu's eyes lit up and said, you said it, don't regret it. Just as they were eating happily, the sound of the door opening was heard. Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng stood up immediately. Their faces also looked a little nervous. The door opened, and a person walked in. Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng greeted him quickly. Boss Lin. You. It was Qiao Yushan who came in. Seeing two beautiful girls sitting at the dining table with Su Weifeng, he couldn't help but frown slightly. Su Weifeng smiled and said, Yushan, let me introduce you. These two are two screenwriters in my company. This is Sun Yumeng and this is Zhao Xiaoshu. They are very good. I have nothing to do today, so I invited them to my house for dinner. Yumeng, Xiaoshu, this is my wife Qiao Yushan. Hello, sister-in-law. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu greeted him quickly. Zhao Xiaoshu was secretly looking at Qiao Yushan and couldn't help but be very surprised. This Qiao Yushan actually looked exactly like Lin Zuangsun. If she didn't tell her, she couldn't tell them apart at all. Qiao Yushan nodded and said, hello, you guys. I've met Yumeng, but this Xiaoshu is the first time I meet. You're all welcome to our restaurant. Sun Yumeng hurriedly said, thank you, sister-in-law. I'm sorry to bother you. Su Weifeng said, you haven't eaten yet, right? Yumeng cooked today. Her cooking skills are really good. Come and eat quickly. Qiao Yushan smiled slightly and said, I'll go change my clothes first and come down to eat soon. After Qiao Yushan went upstairs, Zhao Xiaoshu immediately said curiously, Brother Su, aren't sister-in-law and Mr. Lin twins? Su Weifeng shook his head and said, no, their mother is a twin, so they look very similar. Zhao Xiaoshu asked again, is their father also a twin? No. Then this is strange. The father is not a twin, only the mother is a twin. They look exactly the same. Doesn't the father's genes have any influence at all? Su Weifeng was stunned for a moment and said, what you said seems to make sense, but maybe their mother's genes are stronger. Sun Yumeng didn't care about this, but said worriedly, you brought us back. My sister-in-law won't be unhappy, right? Su Weifeng smiled slightly and said, no, you know our relationship, but don't point it out. You just know it, so that she won't feel unnatural. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu nodded repeatedly. Qiao Yushan quickly changed into a set of home clothes and sat down at the dining table. Looking at the dishes on the table, she smiled and said, it's so rich. You guys really know how to enjoy it. Su Weifeng smiled and said, it's not that the two great contributors have finished filming their scripts. I wanted to treat them to a meal, but they came to cook for me instead. Qiao Yushan tasted 2 bites and nodded repeatedly, saying, it's as good as auntie's cooking. Is this made by Yumeng? Sun Yumeng said cautiously, well, I just made some casually. I don't know if it suits my sister-in-law's taste. Qiao Yushan smiled and said, not bad, it's delicious. You don't have to be so restrained. Eat together. It must be said that Qiao Yushan still looks like a hostess and greets the two of them enthusiastically. However, Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu are not familiar with Qiao Yushan, so they are still quite restrained here and even a little cautious. After dinner, Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu began to clean up the table. Qiao Yushan hurriedly said, you are guests. It's embarrassing to ask you to cook, let alone clean up. Sun Yumeng smiled and said, sister-in-law, you are a big shot. How can you do these things? Let us do it. Qiao Yushan smiled and said, we are at home now. You are guests. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu rushed to clean up and left quickly. Qiao Yushan and Su Weifeng sent them to the door of the villa. Turning around, Qiao Yushan squinted at Su Weifeng and said, I'm not at home, and Zhuangxuan is not here either. You can't stand the loneliness, so you specially found two beauties to accompany you. Su Weifeng chuckled and said, what's the matter, is my wife jealous? Qiao Yushan rolled her eyes at Su Weifeng and said, I'm just reminding you not to mess around. If you accidentally cause something to happen, or even someone dies, you'll be in trouble. Su Weifeng's face turned dark and he said, look at what you said. Am I that kind of person? If I really am that kind of person, someone would have died here a long time ago. Go away, whatever you want. I don't agree. Qiao Yushan's face suddenly turned red. She glared at Su Weifeng and went straight back to sit on the sofa in the living room. Su Weifeng sat down next to Qiao Yushan and said, today is not the weekend. How come you have time to come back? Qiao Yushan rubbed his forehead and said, I was attending a meeting here. Although I went to the provincial capital, I was still required to attend any meetings here. Alas, many meetings are unnecessary, but I have to come. It's really a headache. Su Weifeng chuckled and said, that shows that he values you. Qiao Yushan said helplessly, forget it, I really don't like this kind of attention. I still like to do things in a down-to-earth manner. Su Weifeng asked with concern, is everything going well at the head office? It's okay. Although there are some problems, I can still solve them. The most important thing is that the chairman has given me enough power. Even if some people are not convinced or have some ideas, they can't touch me. The two chatted casually, and there was really a tacit understanding and harmony between husband and wife. Chapter 457 We are the same kind of people. Qiao Yushan stood up and said, I'm going to take a shower. Please give me a massage today. Su Weifeng said, go ahead. I'll take a shower too, and then I'll give you a massage. Su Weifeng didn't go back to the bedroom to take a shower. He took a shower on the first floor, and then returned to the bedroom. Men take showers quickly, but women take showers much slower. When Su Weifeng came back, Qiao Yushan was still taking a shower. Through the transparent glass, Su Weifeng could vaguely see Qiao Yushan, but he walked over immediately. This kind of peeking, well, although I want to see, it's better to control it a little. Weifeng, come here. Su Weifeng immediately walked to the door of the bathroom, not daring to look inside, and said, I'm here. Didn't you take your clothes? I took them. Come in. Ah. Su Weifeng was stunned for a moment, and then he opened the door, as if possessed by a ghost, and saw Qiao Yushan already dressed, and sitting in front of the wash basin. PFFT, you scared me. Su Weifeng couldn't help but laugh at himself. Qiao Yushan rolled her eyes at Su Weifeng and said, what's the matter? Did you think I was naked and let you come in to take advantage of me? Su Weifeng did not deny it and said with a smile, okay, I was just being sentimental. Qiao Yushan hit Su Weifeng and said, I'm really tired today. Can you help me blow dry my hair? I'm happy to help you. Su Weifeng picked up the hairdryer, held up Qiao Yushan's hair, and started blowing it. Su Weifeng said with a bit of heartache, I see that you are really working hard. You should learn to relax properly. When others say something nice to you, you just work hard for them. Qiao Yushan said angrily, this is because the chairman has taken a liking to me. This is an opportunity that others want but cannot get. I can't ignore this kind of appreciation because of her relationship with you. Su Weifeng sighed lightly and said, but you are working so hard, I feel bad for you too. Qiao Yushan looked at Su Weifeng in the mirror opposite, chuckled and said, I haven't seen you for a few days. You are really getting better and better at talking. Did you learn it from some girl? Su Weifeng rolled his eyes and said, you are a bit petty and judge others by your own standards. Humph, if you are a gentleman, you are also a hypocrite. After blowing Qiao Yushan's hair, Su Weifeng said, it's not convenient to massage your head on the bed, so I'll massage your head and shoulders here. Qiao Yushan smiled at the mirror and said, then thank you for your help. Su Weifeng smiled and said, why are you being so polite to me? You are my wife. Qiao Yushan said, that's true. Other wives order their husbands around. I'm still being polite to you. It seems that I need to practice more. Qiao Yushan didn't mind this title at all. After all, the two of them were married. In front of Su Weifeng's parents, she always had to use this title. Su Weifeng massaged Qiao Yushan for a while, and Qiao Yushan said, let me lean on you for a while. As she spoke, she simply leaned her head on Su Weifeng's body. This was clearly a sign of Qiao Yushan's extreme fatigue. Su Weifeng opened his mouth and wanted to persuade her, but he knew that persuasion was useless. It was like he was going back to the army, and who could stop him? Su Weifeng massaged her head and then began to massage her shoulders, trying to relieve her fatigue. After massaging for a while, Qiao Yushan's body suddenly turned to one side. It turned out that she was very comfortable being massaged, and then she fell asleep involuntarily. But this movement caused an embarrassing thing to happen. Ah, you. Qiao Yushan cried out, but she didn't stand up, and she didn't slap Su Weifeng in the face. She just stared at the mirror with wide eyes, looking at the posture of the two at this time. Su Weifeng quickly pulled his hand back and said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Humph, you did it on purpose. Qiao Yushan glared at Su Weifeng fiercely, then stood up, walked past Su Weifeng, and went straight into the bedroom. Su Weifeng stood there for half a minute, then walked into the bedroom, looking at Qiao Yushan with her back to him. He didn't know if Qiao Yushan was really angry. Qiao Yushan suddenly turned her head and said, why don't you come up yet? You haven't finished massaging me yet. Are you trying to cut corners? You are not qualified to be my husband. Su Weifeng immediately knew that Qiao Yushan was not angry. He smiled and immediately climbed onto the bed and said, how can I cut corners when massaging my wife? It is absolutely genuine. Qiao Yushan turned over and skillfully put her legs on Su Weifeng's body. After a while of massage, Qiao Yushan actually fell asleep this time. Su Weifeng sighed. Although Qiao Yushan was hard, she must be happy, just like he was on the verge of life and death every time he carried out a mission, but the sense of accomplishment and glory after completing the mission was incomparable to anything else. Qiao Yushan, like himself, was a person who pursued his own ideals, so he didn't need to persuade Qiao Yushan anymore. The phone rang. It was Lin Zhuangxuan calling. Su Weifeng quickly hung up the phone, then got off the bed carefully, walked out of the room, and called back. Lin Zhuangxuan immediately asked angrily, hey, you actually hung up my phone. Are you doing something bad? Su Weifeng hurriedly said, Yushan is back and just fell asleep. Ah, my sister is back. Lin Zhuangxuan's voice suddenly lowered, and said, she went to bed so early? You are not with my sister. Su Weifeng was speechless. Lin Zhuangxuan, this girl, was very jealous when she saw him with other women, but when she knew he was with Qiao Yushan, she always looked like she was watching a good show, and even looked forward to Su Weifeng and Qiao Yushan going to bed. No way, she was very tired these days. I massaged her for a few times and she fell asleep directly. Lin Zhuangxuan said, my sister is just too strong-willed. She wants to do everything to the best of her ability. Just about enough is enough. Su Weifeng chuckled and said, I'm not like that now. This filming has kept you so busy that you almost wish you could split yourself into two people. Lin Zhuangxuan exclaimed and said, oh, that's right. Why am I becoming more and more like my sister? No, I want to play and have fun. After I finish filming this online movie, I must go out and have fun. You have to accompany me. Chapter 458, Meaningful. Su Weifeng woke up the next morning. He couldn't help but feel guilty. Now that he and Qiao Yushan were sleeping together, he was getting more and more casual. He hugged Qiao Yushan from behind again, and put his hands in places where they shouldn't be. It's no wonder. These days, his feelings with Lin Zhuangxuan have increased. When they were together, he did these things very casually. Although Qiao Yushan has changed now, Qiao Yushan and Lin Zhuangxuan look the same, and they are in the same bed. How can he tell Qiao Yushan from Lin Zhuangxuan at night? Naturally, he was quite casual. Just thinking about these, Qiao Yushan in his arms moved slightly, obviously waking up. Su Weifeng secretly said that it was bad. He forgot to pull his hand out when thinking about these things just now. He should pretend to sleep now. Su Weifeng suddenly felt a pain in his arm. He couldn't pretend anymore. He could only pull his hand out quickly and said, "Sorry, it was an unconscious movement." Qiao Yushan turned around and stared into Su Weifeng's eyes. Su Weifeng made Qiao Yushan feel uncomfortable and said, "You don't think I did it on purpose?" Qiao Yushan snorted and said, "I know you didn't mean it." "That's good." Su Weifeng breathed a sigh of relief. "But I feel like you're quite skilled at this." Su Weifeng analyzed the expression in Qiao Yushan's eyes and face when she said this, but he couldn't see through Qiao Yushan's true intention at all. Su Weifeng could only say awkwardly, "This should be a man's instinct." Qiao Yushan raised the corner of her mouth and said, "I don't think so. You're used to touching me, right?" Su Weifeng finally understood the point of Qiao Yushan's words. This was clearly referring to him and Lin Zhuangxuan. This matter was absolutely impossible to admit. Absolutely not. If I want to get used to it, someone has to let me touch it, right? Qiao Yushan curled her lips and snorted, "I'll sleep a little longer. Wake me up at 7 o'clock. Then she turned over and faced him with her back. Su Weifeng was a little confused. What was going on? It just passed like that. Qiao Yushan stopped asking questions, but it seemed that Qiao Yushan was really going to sleep. Su Weifeng got up directly and went to the gym at his home to do some basic physical training. Then he made a simple breakfast and went upstairs to wake up Qiao Yushan. Qiao Yushan stretched lazily and sat up. She said, "It's still more comfortable to sleep at home. I haven't slept so deeply for a long time. I feel more energetic when I wake up." Su Weifeng smiled and said, "Then come back often in the future." "Do you really hope that I will come back often?" Qiao Yushan gave Su Weifeng a meaningful look. Su Weifeng coughed lightly and said, "You are my wife. Of course I welcome you back." Qiao Yushan smiled faintly and said, "I'm afraid that someone just doesn't mean what he says." After that, Qiao Yushan got up and went into the bathroom. Su Weifeng shook his head. He felt that Qiao Yushan must know that the relationship between him and Lin Zhuangxuan had progressed, so she said such a thing. Thinking back to what Qiao Yushan had said before, if he and Lin Zhuangxuan had a good relationship, she would support them. So that's why she has this attitude. But, since she has this attitude, she is not angry about Su Weifeng's physical contact with her. This is what Su Weifeng can't understand. After breakfast, Qiao Yushan went out directly. As the president of the group, a private driver is a must. Su Weifeng came to the company, and Sun Yumeng came to his office soon. "Did you come here by yourself?" Su Weifeng asked with a smile. Sun Yumeng sat across from Su Weifeng's desk and said, "Xiao Shu has classes today, and the script has come to an end. She doesn't need to come to the company every day." After briefly talking about the company's affairs, Sun Yumeng asked cautiously, "Didn't my sister-in-law come yesterday?" Su Weifeng smiled and said, "No, she also praised your cooking and asked you to come more often in the future." Sun Yumeng breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I've been worried all the time." Su Weifeng said, "Didn't I tell you that we are just helping each other and will not interfere with each other's lives?" Sun Yumeng stuck out her tongue and said, "Although this is the case, I feel that Qiao Yushan is still your wife and General Manager Lin is still your girlfriend, so when I see them, I feel uneasy." Su Weifeng laughed and said, "Don't think too much, just do what you have to do." Sun Yumeng walked out happily. At noon, Su Weifeng came to the gym again. While doing strength training, Feng Bao came to the strength room in a fitness suit. When she saw Su Weifeng, her eyes lit up immediately and she ran straight over. Everyone immediately turned their attention to Feng Bao and Su Weifeng. Everyone knew about the conflict between Feng Bao and Su Weifeng. Now that Feng Bao was here, there would definitely be another big fight. It would be exciting to watch. Su Weifeng was still doing his training, and he didn't even look at Feng Bao. What shocked everyone was that Feng Bao was standing next to Sui Feng at this time, without any movement, let alone a word, just staring at Sui Feng. What's going on? Shouldn't Feng Bao fight this guy directly? I don't know. Maybe it's because of the brewing of emotions. The longer it takes, the more violent it will explode. When has Feng Bao suffered a loss? Can she just let it go like this? Yes, that must be the case. At this moment, Sui Feng put down the equipment and stood up. Then he saw Feng Bao actually picked up the towel and handed it to Sui Feng with a flattering look on her face. Everyone's eyes almost popped out. What's going on? Feng Bao actually did this to a man. This was completely beyond everyone's perception of Feng Bao. How did that guy do it to make Feng Bao please him? Feng Bao didn't care what others thought of her. She had been watching Sui Feng's training. Although in the eyes of others, Sui Feng's training was not much different from others. But Feng Bao looked at the training method Sui Feng gave her and saw that the way Sui Feng trained was exactly in this method. This was enough to prove that Sui Feng was not lying to her, but really gave her a high-end training method. Sui Feng took the towel, wiped the sweat off his face, and said, "Why are you so nice today?" Feng Bao smiled and said, "This is what I should do. I, Feng Bao, have a clear distinction between gratitude and resentment. Although you don't let me be your apprentice, I also regard you as my teacher. Whatever you want." Sui Feng walked straight to another machine and started to prepare for training again. Feng Bao immediately came to the same machine next to Sui Feng and prepared to practice with Sui Feng. Sui Feng glared and said, "Take it step by step. Start from the beginning." Feng Bao immediately shrank her neck and said, "Yes, yes." Then she ran out immediately. Everyone had a dazed look on their faces. Feng Bao was conquered by this man. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 459, Confessing to Lin Zhuangxun. A few days later, Lin Zhuangxun finally finished filming. This kind of online movie is completely different from normal theater movies. It is much simpler, so it took more than 10 days to shoot almost everything. The next step is post-editing and production. Sui Feng specially arranged a wrap-up party, and all the crew members and other people in the company attended. After so many days of hard work, everyone drank happily and didn't leave until midnight. Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng also sat in Sui Feng's car. He wanted to send 2 people home and then go home with Lin Zhuangxun. Sitting in the car, Sun Yumeng bit her lip and said, "Boss Su, Boss Lin, I still have something to talk to you about. Can I bother you again?" Lin Zhuangxun was sitting in the co-pilot seat. At this time, he turned his head and squinted his eyes and said, "Okay, I haven't had enough to drink yet. You can come to my house and drink with me." Sun Yumeng clenched his fist and said, "Okay, then I'll bother you, Boss Lin." After a while, the 4 people arrived at Sui Feng's house. Recently, Sui Feng's parents have basically stopped coming here. Their son's marriage and house issues have been resolved. They have started to live their own lives, and the focus of their lives is no longer on Sui Feng. As soon as Lin Zhuangxun came in, she threw herself heavily on the sofa. She stretched out her 4 legs and shouted comfortably, "It's still comfortable at home. I've been outside these days and it's really uncomfortable. Xiaoshu, Yumeng, you sit down. You're welcome here." Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu both sat down in an orderly manner. Lin Zhuangxun said to Sui Feng again, "Wei Feng, bring some more wine. I'm happy today. If I don't drink to my heart's content, it's really not fun." Sui Feng smiled slightly and said, "Okay, but just some red wine." "That's fine. Anyway, there's wine." Sui Feng brought 2 bottles of red wine and poured them for everyone. Lin Zhuangxun excitedly talked about the various things that happened during the filming these days. This was her first time to shoot such a movie, and it was definitely a challenge for her, so she would remember even the smallest details clearly. Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng also found it very interesting, but they were a little uneasy in their hearts. By the way, you said you wanted to talk to us about something, but I was so focused on talking to myself that I forgot about it. Now you talk. Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng looked at each other, and then Zhao Xiaoshu timidly begged Sun Yumeng. Obviously he didn't dare to speak. Sun Yumeng picked up the wine glass and drank the red wine in it in one gulp. Then he clenched his fist and stood up, saying, "Boss Lin, Xiaoshu and I are here to admit our mistakes to you." "Admit your mistakes?" Lin Zhuangxuan narrowed his eyes and said, "You did a great job this time." The director praised your script again and again, saying that your script is comparable to those of famous screenwriters. Sun Yumeng bit her lip and said, "It's not about work, it's about us, and, Boss Su." "Oh." Lin Zhuangxuan looked at Su Weifeng. Su Weifeng smiled awkwardly and kept silent. Let Sun Yumeng talk about it first. It's not that he doesn't dare to take responsibility, but if he tells everything himself, Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu will probably feel more guilty. Sun Yumeng took a deep breath and then said, "We went up the mountain to play that day, and we encountered heavy rain when we came down. In order to protect us, Brother Su slid down the mountain and took us to hide under a rock to avoid the rain, and then we—" "What happened to you? Did you have sex? 1 against 2? Lin Zhuangxuan narrowed his eyes. Sun Yumeng's face turned red immediately, and she stammered, No, it's just that the place is small, so we hugged each other." Lin Zhuangxuan chuckled and said, "Hugging together? This is nothing, it's a temporary measure under special circumstances, I can understand." Zhao Xiaoshu gritted his teeth and said, "Boss Lin, we didn't just hug each other, we hugged for a while. I was impulsive and kissed Brother Su. Brother Su was seduced by me, Yumeng was also led astray by me, and they also kissed. All this is my fault." Sun Yumeng's face turned redder. Although she would rather take the initiative to admit her mistakes, she really couldn't say such words. Lin Zhuangxuan leaned back on the sofa, crossed his legs, and held a glass of red wine in his hand. His eyes moved back and forth between Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng, but he said nothing, making Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu so nervous that they dared not breathe. Su Weifeng sighed and said, "Zhuangxuan, as a man, the responsibility is still mine. I didn't control myself well." Lin Zhuangxuan rolled his eyes at Su Weifeng, and then said to Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu, "If you hadn't told me about this, I wouldn't have known about it. Why did you confess to me?" Sun Yumeng hurriedly said, "After this happened, I can't sleep or eat well every day. I feel very sorry for President Lin. I really don't know how to face President Lin in the future." Zhao Xiaoshu also said, "I promised President Lin last time, but I still didn't do it. I've let President Lin trust me so much and gave me such a good opportunity. I Lin Zhuangxuan took a sip of red wine and then said slowly, "Yumeng, you seem to have found the wrong person. You know that I'm not your President Su's girlfriend." Sun Yumeng was speechless and looked at Su Weifeng. Su Weifeng coughed lightly and said, "Zhuangxuan, I told them about my situation." Lin Zhuangxuan rolled her eyes at Su Weifeng again and said, "You really treat them as your women. You even told them about this." Su Weifeng said calmly, "At this time, that's not the case. I recognize them as my sisters." "What about me?" Lin Zhuangxuan narrowed her eyes. Su Weifeng sat down next to her, hugged her shoulders, and said, "Of course you are my girlfriend. Humph, stop coaxing me." Lin Zhuangxuan shook her shoulders, but did not shake off Su Weifeng, and let him hug her. Then she cast her eyes on Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu, her face suddenly red, and said, "You two are really good. You two kissed this guy together." Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu both blushed, not knowing how to answer. Lin Zhuangxuan waved her hand and said, "Okay, let's forget about it. You all know that this guy can't be with you in the future. If you still insist on being with him, it's up to you." Huh? Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu's eyes widened, looking at Lin Zhuangxuan in disbelief. It's over already, and not only did he not blame them, but he also let them do as they please. Chapter 461. Person can't do it. Come on, let's not talk about this anymore. I'm happy today. Let's continue drinking. Lin Zhuangxuan really didn't seem to be unhappy. Zhao Xiaoshu quickly poured wine for everyone. Lin Zhuangxuan smiled and said, "Come on, whether you are Weifeng's sister or his lover in the future, we are good sisters. Cheers to our sisters." Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu were both confused and could only raise their glasses. Looking at the stiff expressions of the two, Lin Zhuangxuan said unsatisfiedly, "It's boring for you to be like this. There is no atmosphere at all. What, do you want to snatch Wei Feng away?" Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu hurriedly shook their heads. Lin Zhuangxuan raised the glass again and said, "Then drink happily, let's get drunk." Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu were indeed confused at this time, but since Lin Zhuangxuan was like this, they could only drink with gritted teeth. After a while, the two were drunk and fell on the sofa. Lin Zhuangxuan was also staggering, and it was obvious that he was also drunk. Su Weifeng carried Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu to the guest room downstairs and settled them down. When he came out to Lin Zhuangxuan stretched out her arms and hugged Su Weifeng's neck, saying in a sweet voice, "Hold me." Su Weifeng directly gave Lin Zhuangxuan a princess hug and picked her up, saying, Don't you feel uncomfortable after drinking so much?" Lin Zhuangxuan looked at Su Weifeng with drunken eyes and said, "It's uncomfortable. The man I like is so worried about me. How can I not feel uncomfortable?" Su Weifeng was a little embarrassed and said, "I'm sorry." Lin Zhuangxuan buried her head in Su Weifeng's shoulder and murmured, "There's nothing to be sorry about. Who made the man I like so outstanding?" Su Weifeng carried Lin Zhuangxuan to the bedroom and wanted to put her on the bed, but Lin Zhuangxuan held his neck and refused to let go. "I want to take a shower. You carry me to take a shower." "Okay, take a shower, take a shower." Su Weifeng had to pick up Lin Zhuangxuan and go into the bathroom again. But Lin Zhuangxuan still held him tightly. Su Weifeng said helplessly, "How can you take a shower if you hold me like this?" Lin Zhuangxuan smiled and said, "Then I don't care. I want to take a shower anyway, and I want to hold you while taking a shower. Let's take a shower together." Su Weifeng swallowed hard. "Yes." Lin Zhuangxuan nodded. This won't work. I won't be able to control myself." Su Weifeng almost agreed without thinking, but his reason immediately reminded him that this was absolutely not possible. The smile on Lin Zhuangxuan's face became even more intense, and she said, "If you can't control it, then don't control it." The barrier that Su Weifeng had just erected in his heart was almost broken directly, and he hurriedly said, "Zhuangxuan, this really won't work." Lin Zhuangxuan pinched Su Weifeng angrily and said with a pout, "You idiot, you can do bad things with those two little girls. Why can't you do anything with me?" Su Weifeng took a deep breath, then stared into Lin Zhuangxuan's eyes and said gently, "Because I like you, I care about you more in my heart, and I don't want to hurt you even more." Lin Zhuangxuan met Su Weifeng's gaze, and her eyes slowly condensed into a mist. Then she kissed Su Weifeng hard and said, "Then you can help me wash it. You have helped me wash it, and this is not the first time." Lin Zhuangxuan immediately stopped Su Weifeng and said angrily, "You are not allowed to say no. You don't take off your clothes." "Okay, I promise you." Su Weifeng smiled and said, "How could I refuse such a good thing?" The next scene can only be imagined. But soon something happened that made Lin Zhuangxuan depressed. Su Weifeng entered that state again. "Asshole, idiot." After cursing Su Weifeng in his heart for a while, Lin Zhuangxuan had no choice but to continue washing by herself. But watching Su Weifeng like a statue by the bathtub was actually quite interesting. Su Weifeng finally came out of that state, carried Lin Zhuangxuan to the bed, and washed himself briefly before returning to the bedroom. Lin Zhuangxuan directly wrapped around him like a snake. Looking up, Lin Zhuangxuan looked at Su Weifeng and said, "How is the effect this time?" "Very good. The effect is very strong." Su Weifeng praised with satisfaction. "Then you estimate?" Lin Zhuangxuan narrowed his eyes and said, "How long will it take you to return to your peak in this way?" Su Weifeng thought about it, but suddenly sighed. "What's wrong?" Lin Zhuangxuan asked worriedly. Su Weifeng said, "At present, I feel that I have only recovered to about 60% of my peak combat power. If I want to recover to the peak, there is definitely a long way to go." Lin Zhuangxuan frowned and said, "So slow, but I found that you can no longer recover our normal intimate actions." Su Weifeng said, "Yeah, I feel like the previous intimate actions are no longer effective. Only more and more intense intimacy can be effective." Lin Zhuangxuan hesitated and said, "What about you and Qiao Yushan? How are you two?" Su Weifeng was stunned for a moment, then thought about it carefully, and said, we are not like this. The last time I entered the realm with her, it was not a very strong physical contact. Lin Zhuangxuan suddenly said with a smile, Weifeng, you make me feel like you are finding a perfect reason to pick up girls. What? Su Weifeng was a little puzzled by Lin Zhuangxuan's sudden words. Lin Zhuangxuan suddenly pinched Su Weifeng and said, why are you pretending to be confused? This is clearly the effect you can get on a woman. It's just like that. Only when you change a different woman will you get such an effect. Ah. Su Weifeng was stunned for a moment. Following Lin Zhuangxuan's train of thought, he suddenly felt that what Lin Zhuangxuan said was absolutely correct, and that was the fact. Lin Zhuangxuan looked at Su Weifeng resentfully and said, are you feeling particularly happy now? I can't stop you from picking up any girls you want in the future? Su Weifeng shook his head decisively and said, no, it's definitely not that simple. In addition to physical contact, the most important thing is to feel emotions. If I don't feel emotions, it will be completely ineffective. Without waiting for Lin Zhuangxuan to speak, Su Weifeng said, I can never take the initiative to pick up girls. Lin Zhuangxuan looked at Su Weifeng, sighed softly, and said, do you know why I was so tolerant of Sun Yumeng and Zhao Zhaoshu this time? Why? Don't tell me you had thought of this a long time ago. Su Weifeng asked in surprise. Chapter 461 I'll help you count. Lin Zhuangxuan said softly, yes, I thought about it. I thought about it a long time ago. I know you will definitely go back. I also know how dangerous the things you will face in the future are. If you don't have enough strength, then I want to let you live well. Only by making you as strong as before, or even stronger than before, can you live well. Su Weifeng hugged Lin Zhuangxuan and hugged her tightly. He was so moved that he couldn't express it in words. Weifeng, I love you. I really love you. Even if you can't be with me in the future, I still love you. Lin Zhuangxuan's voice became lower and lower, and finally she fell asleep. Su Weifeng looked down at Lin Zhuangxuan. His eyes were tender and affectionate. Although Lin Zhuangxuan drank a lot of wine, I don't know how much of it was drunken talk, but her feelings were real. Zhuangxuan, no matter what time it is, I love you too. Su Weifeng lowered his head and kissed Lin Zhuangxuan's forehead gently. Then his head banged, and the true energy in his body started to move violently again. Su Weifeng was stunned. This was the first time he entered that state twice in a row in such a long time. Moreover, this state was obviously stronger than any previous one. Su Weifeng quickly immersed himself in this state. He didn't want to waste such a good opportunity. It took more than 2 hours for Su Weifeng to finish. He didn't move, thinking about a question in his mind. Why did this happen this time? Soon, he had the answer. Love, the sublimation of emotions. Although he had admitted that he liked Lin Zhuangxuan before, it was obviously not enough. Lin Zhuangxuan's deep love for him prompted Su Weifeng's love for Lin Zhuangxuan to be sublimated. In fact, the most important thing for his recovery method is still emotion, and he still needs the kind of love that comes from the heart. The stronger the love, the deeper the love, the stronger the state will be. Holding Lin Zhuangxuan, Su Weifeng felt indescribable happiness in his heart, and then he fell asleep soon. The next morning, Lin Zhuangxuan looked at Su Weifeng's radiant appearance and said in surprise, what happened? Why do you look different? Su Weifeng kissed Lin Zhuangxuan on the lips and said, it's all because of you. Because of me? What's wrong with me? Oh, I'm not wearing any clothes. Su Weifeng shook his head and said, no. Then why? Lin Zhuangxuan looked at Su Weifeng in even more surprise. Su Weifeng kissed Lin Zhuangxuan again, hugged her tightly, and said, because I like my little Zhuangxuan so much. I had another experience last night. Lin Zhuangxuan became more interested and asked, what do you mean? Su Weifeng stared into her eyes and said gently, what you said yesterday really touched me. I felt that I loved you to death, and then it happened. Lin Zhuangxuan blinked, and then immediately said happily, I really like to hear that. The two of them stayed together for a while, and Lin Zhuangxuan asked again, have you recovered a lot this time? Su Weifeng nodded and said, this time it should be much better than before. What about the proportion from your peak? This is what Lin Zhuangxuan cares about most. Su Weifeng pondered for a moment and said, let me put it this way. In the past, it could usually recover 0.1% at a time, and this time it can increase to 0.5%. Lin Zhuangxuan rolled her eyes and said, "Oh my god, this is still a huge gap. I think I can only help you improve to about 1%. Doesn't that mean that to fully recover to your peak, you need more than 30 women?" Su Weifeng was immediately speechless and said, No, that's not what I mean. We can take it slowly. Just like last night, I suddenly improved a lot. As our relationship heats up, I think the improvement will be even greater. Okay, even if I can still help you improve, let's calculate a little more. I can help you improve by another 5%. I think this is probably the limit. There's still a lot to come. Even if Qiao Yushan is added, it's only 10%. There's still a gap of 30%. Su Weifeng was a little speechless. Lin Zhuangxuan thought for a while and said, if we add the two little girls, Sun Yumeng and Zhao Zhaoshu, we can add another 10%, which means we are still short of 20%. So we need at least 4 more people. Su Weifeng was already a little dumbfounded. Oh, and there is Meng Keqing. She has a different position in your heart, and maybe more stimulating to you. If we count her as 10%, we still need 10%, and we still need 2 more. Su Weifeng was petrified. Oh, and there is Zhu Zhaoxun. She is obviously interested in you. There should be no problem with this. We still need 1 more person. Yes, there is also Xu Lingling. Although I like her too much, I will count her in for your recovery. This doesn't seem to be very safe. If we can't reach the target, we still need a backup. Who else is it? Hey, think about it. Who else is interested in you? Su Weifeng could put an egg in his mouth now, and looked at Lin Zhuangxuan with a dull look. I'm talking to you. Why don't you think about it? Su Weifeng finally closed his mouth and stammered. Zhuangxuan, your idea. Lin Zhuangxuan glared and said, I'm talking to you seriously. Can you be serious? Su Weifeng was extremely moved and said, Zhuangxuan, this matter doesn't need to be solved in this way. We didn't know the method before, but we found it slowly. Lin Zhuangxuan said seriously, I know that too, but I have to prepare for the worst. If there is only this one method, we have to prepare for it. Tell me, who else is possible? This, and my classmate Zheng Shiqing. Oh yes, how could I forget about her? I haven't seen her for a long time. You're really something. You don't contact her often. Su Weifeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. One backup doesn't seem appropriate. Think of another one. By the way, we can also consider the female police officer recently. Forget it. She has a bad temper. Lin Zhuangxuan nodded and said, but I feel that it is easy to be a backup. You have only been back for a short time, and so many women are thinking about you. After a while, maybe other people will join the backup team. Su Weifeng laughed dryly and said, are you praising me or insulting me? Lin Zhuangxuan chuckled and said, what do you think? Guess. Su Weifeng shook his head and said, but I think what you said is impossible. Why? Lin Zhuangxuan said puzzledly, these girls are all first-class beauties. There is not a bad one. Su Weifeng shook his head again and said, even if you send them to me, and to my bed, it will be useless, if I don't like you. Lin Zhuangxuan clapped his hands and said, that's right. Isn't it a waste of time? Chapter 462, Born Novelist. Su Weifeng nodded seriously and said, I admit that I'm not very straightforward when it comes to treating women, so I gave some people a chance, but it is really difficult for me to invest my feelings. You are the only one I like and love from the bottom of my heart. Lin Zhuangxuan narrowed his eyes and said, I'm really happy to hear what you said. What about my sister Qiao Yushan? Su Weifeng thought for a while and said, I also have feelings for Yushan, but compared to you, it is still far worse. After all, we don't have much time to spend together. Lin Zhuangxuan nodded, and then said with anticipation, then there should be Meng Keqing now. What about her? Su Weifeng also smiled slightly at this time and said, the feeling I have towards her is indeed a little special, and there is an element of admiration in it. So when I know that she likes me, I'm also excited, but it seems that I lack the feeling of being a real couple with you. Lin Zhuangxuan directly gave Su Weifeng a kiss and said, since you are so honest and what you said makes me so happy, I will reward you. Su Weifeng returned a kiss and said, my Zhuangxuan is still the best. Lin Zhuangxuan said, then you have to work hard and try to like them all. Su Weifeng pinched Lin Zhuangxuan's face and said, even if it's for recovery, I can't let myself fall in love with someone casually. And it's hard for me to accept a woman for this reason, so let it all go with the flow. But when the motherland needs you, you don't use your best condition and peak combat power. It's not just a matter of your personal danger, but also the importance of whether you can successfully complete the mission. How can it all go with the flow? Su Weifeng was stunned for a moment. The interests of the country are above everything else. This has long been deeply rooted in his heart. Lin Zhuangxuan said again, and you are not playing with feelings. I think if these people knew your situation, they would definitely help you without hesitation. Su Weifeng shook his head again and said, Zhuangxuan, don't do this deliberately, otherwise it will only make me more resistant. Lin Zhuangxuan did not insist this time. She also knew that this matter would be reversed. Su Weifeng seemed to be very popular with women, and he was not even so loyal, but his principles were very strong. Otherwise, she would still be naked now. Why didn't this guy take any further action? They had to go to the company later. There were still many things to do today. Lin Zhuangxuan and Su Weifeng packed up and went downstairs. Breakfast was already set on the table downstairs. As soon as Zhao Xiaoshu came out of the kitchen, he immediately said, Brother Su, President Lin, I was just going to call you for breakfast. Lin Zhuangxuan chuckled and said, don't call me that at home. Just call me by my name. We are not outsiders. Ah. Zhao Xiaoshu was a little at a loss. Sun Yumeng, who followed him, also looked at Lin Zhuangxuan with an uneasy look. Lin Zhuangxuan's smile became even stronger, and she said, you all recognize Weifeng as your brother, so you are also my sisters from now on, and we are a family. Do we still need to be so polite to each other? Sun Yumeng said cautiously. Boss Lin, you really don't blame us. Lin Zhuangxuan said with a straight face, call me Boss Lin again, and call me Zhuangxuan from now on. Why should I blame you? We all know that getting along with Weifeng now is like a mirage, which cannot be taken seriously. I'm a fake girlfriend. First of all, I have no right to blame you, and secondly, I don't want to blame you. Sister Zhuangxuan, Zhao Xiaoshu's lips trembled all of a sudden. She was actually the most afraid. This was the second time that such an unfriendly thing happened with Su Weifeng. She was really afraid that Lin Zhuangxuan would drive her away in anger. Lin Zhuangxuan directly took Zhao Xiaoshu's hand, chuckled, and said, okay, you look so aggrieved, as if I bullied you. Zhao Xiaoshu wiped his eyes with his other hand and said, no, I'm just too excited, too surprised, and too touched. Okay, let's eat quickly, there are still a lot of things to do at the company today. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu were still a little nervous when they were eating. They were really afraid that Lin Zhuangxuan was pretending to be like this and then making trouble. But soon, they felt that Lin Zhuangxuan's attitude was sincere. He really treated them as sisters and friends, and didn't treat them as enemies at all. This made the two of them secretly relieved, but they were more confused in their hearts. What was going on? But Lin Zhuangxuan didn't say it, and they didn't dare to ask. In addition, when they looked at Su Weifeng, they felt that Su Weifeng's attitude seemed a little unnatural, so they still felt a little unsure. Lin Zhuangxuan didn't explain. She knew that Su Weifeng didn't want to use such a reason to make the two little girls make any choice. After breakfast, the four of them went to the company first. Lin Zhuangxuan and Sun Yumeng got off the car. Su Weifeng sent Zhao Xiaoshu back to school. Brother Su, Sister Zhuangxuan. Zhao Xiaoshu sat in the back, holding the backrest of the chair in front of him with both hands, hesitating to speak. Su Weifeng smiled and said, don't worry, Zhuangxuan really doesn't blame you. Zhao Xiaoshu immediately said, that's unlikely. If it were me, I would definitely be jealous and angry. Su Weifeng said, there are some special reasons for this, but I can't tell you and Yumeng now. You just need to be yourself. You mean, we can still be the same as before, and Sister Zhuangxuan won't target us at all? Of course not. Zhuangxuan is not the kind of person who plays tricks. If she is not satisfied, she will tell you directly. Zhao Xiaoshu opened his mouth, then smiled bitterly and said, I really can't imagine that things will be like this. This is completely beyond my imagination. Su Weifeng remembered what Lin Zhuangxuan said and shook his head. Lin Zhuangxuan's idea was really bold. Then she was deeply touched. Lin Zhuangxuan didn't mind, but she cared most about Su Weifeng's future safety, so she could put aside a woman's basic jealousy. Brother Su, Sister Zhuangxuan said that we are welcome to visit your house often in the future. Why do I feel that Sister Zhuangxuan is a little bit trying to help us? Zhao Xiaoshu is indeed a natural novelist. His perception at this time is still quite sensitive. Su Weifeng laughed dryly and said, don't think too much. Zhao Xiaoshu also shook his head in self-mockery and said, oh, that's true. It's good enough that Sister Zhuangxuan doesn't blame us. How could she let others share the man she likes? Chapter 463 Lin Zhuangxuan's arrangement. Su Weifeng muttered to himself, it's true. But Su Weifeng naturally couldn't say this out loud. He knew very well what Zhao Xiaoshu thought of him. If he said this out loud, Zhao Xiaoshu would definitely have no scruples and boldly confessed his love to him. But Su Weifeng didn't have that feeling for her now. But when Zhao Xiaoshu got off the car, she was obviously very happy. After all, the big stone that had been pressing on her heart for the past few days finally fell, and the result was not as bad as she expected, and it was even much better. The atmosphere in the company is better now. Everyone is busy and devoted. Compared with shooting short videos, shooting a movie, even a big online movie, is more high-end. This also makes everyone recognize the company's strength more and look forward to the company's future development. An actor can only become truly famous if he can shoot a super explosive short video and accumulate a large number of fans. But shooting a big online movie is different. It will attract more attention, and it will be easier to show your acting skills and become famous. Even if he is not famous, he has starred in a big online movie, which is a great addition to his personal qualifications. It is definitely not comparable to the actors in short videos. At this time, Su Weifeng did not have much to do, so he seemed a little idle. It was not until noon that Lin Zhuangxuan had time to come to Su Weifeng's office to eat together. Just after eating a little, Xu Lingling came over. Xu Lingling said with a smile, hey, eating, is it a bit disturbing to you? Lin Zhuangxuan said with a smile, have you eaten? Do you want to eat together? Xu Lingling was stunned for a moment, pointed at herself, and said, you want me to eat with you? Lin Zhuangxuan shrugged his shoulders and said, if you don't want to eat, forget it. I haven't eaten either. Why don't I want to eat? Xu Lingling immediately sat down next to Su Weifeng. Seeing that there were extra chopsticks, she picked them up and ate directly. Her eyes were fixed on Lin Zhuangxuan, and she felt a little confused. When she came here before, Lin Zhuangxuan's attitude was really bad. Today, not only did he not drive her away directly, but he even let her eat here. Something must be wrong when things are abnormal. She even suspected that the food was poisoned. But even if it was poisoned, she had to eat it. She didn't want to show weakness in front of Lin Zhuangxuan. Lin Zhuangxuan took a bite of the food and said with a smile, what excuse are you looking for to get Weifeng out today? Lin Zhuangxuan's behavior made Xu Lingling feel a little weak in front of Lin Zhuangxuan for the first time. She said, it's my birthday today. Lin Zhuangxuan immediately smiled and said, birthday? Then say happy birthday first. Tell me earlier, and I'll order more food. Xu Lingling was even more confused by Lin Zhuangxuan's attitude. She could only try to calm herself and said, I'm having a birthday party at my house tonight. I want to invite you to attend. Do you have time? Lin Zhuangxuan shrugged and said, I'm very busy here. I definitely don't have time to go. Weifeng doesn't have anything to do, so let him go. Xu Lingling had already thought of Lin Zhuangxuan's refusal without hesitation. She was brewing how to target Lin Zhuangxuan, but Lin Zhuangxuan's words made all her preparations useless. She raised the food to her mouth and paused, widening her eyes and said, you actually agreed? Why shouldn't I agree? Lin Zhuangxuan asked back with a smile. Seeing Xu Lingling being controlled by her, Lin Zhuangxuan suddenly felt a sense of accomplishment. In the past, he was always very angry when he was in a head-on confrontation with Xu Lingling. In contrast, the feeling now is really indescribably good. Xu Lingling stuffed the food into her mouth fiercely, chewed it vigorously for a few times, and then smiled and said, then I won't be polite. Weifeng, you must come to my birthday party tonight. Lin Zhuangxuan blinked at Su Weifeng and said, how can I refuse a beautiful woman's invitation? Su Weifeng laughed dryly and said, okay, then I'll go there in the evening. Xu Lingling saw Su Weifeng agreed, but she felt uncomfortable here at this time, and said, then I'll wait for you in the evening, I'm leaving first. Seeing Xu Lingling's somewhat panic-stricken appearance, Lin Zhuangxuan couldn't help but chuckle. Turning around and seeing Su Weifeng's helpless expression, Lin Zhuangxuan rolled her eyes at him and said, such a good thing has been arranged for you, why are you still unhappy? Su Weifeng shook his head and said, the relationship with the Xu family is now close, and attending Xu Lingling's birthday party is not a big deal, but now, I feel weird. Lin Zhuangxuan came over and kissed Su Weifeng, saying, I really like you like this, but you just go ahead and do it, I definitely support you. Didn't I say that this kind of thing should be left to nature? Su Weifeng shook his head again. Lin Zhuangxuan pouted and said, even if it is left to nature, it still needs a chance, and you have been back for more than 3 months, and you have to go back in more than 1.5 years. Time is tight and the task is heavy. How can I have time to let it go for you? Su Weifeng's face suddenly turned black. Time is tight and the task is heavy. Why do these 6 words feel so awkward when they are said in this matter? Okay, I know what you're thinking. Let's just treat it as a normal relationship. Let's go pick out a gift this afternoon. Oh, by the way, if Yu Meng and Xiaoshu don't have anything to do, let them accompany you to pick out gifts. You're a grown man. How can you pick out gifts for a girl? Su Weifeng was really impressed by Lin Zhuangxuan's execution. While talking, Lin Zhuangxuan had already picked up the phone and called Zhao Xiaoshu directly. Xiaoshu, do you have classes this afternoon? If not, it's just right. Come and accompany your big brother Su out. She's going to celebrate a girl's birthday and help her choose a gift. By the way, let your big brother Su buy whatever she likes. You'll be the face of the company in the future, so we can't be shabby. As soon as the phone fell, she immediately called Sun Yumeng again and said the same thing. Su Weifeng couldn't help but laugh and said, you don't miss any opportunity. Lin Zhuangxuan smiled proudly and said, which girlfriend is like me? Just be happy. Be careful when you go out with them in the afternoon. They are all sincere to you. Don't take advantage of them and make up so many messed up reasons. Su Weifeng was speechless. Okay, let's eat. I have something to do later. You still make me worry about you. Really? Lin Zhuangxuan really ate something simple and left directly. She left so freely and unrestrainedly. She didn't feel uncomfortable at all because Su Weifeng was going out with the girls. If there is a competition for the best girlfriend, Lin Zhuangxuan is definitely the best girlfriend in the world. Chapter 464 Zhao Xiaoshu Speculation. Inside the mall, Su Weifeng walked in the middle, with Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu following him on the left and right. Zhao Xiaoshu first said, Brother Su, what happened to Sister Zhuangxuan? I feel so nervous. Su Weifeng laughed dryly and said, nothing happened. She was just worried that I couldn't buy the right things, and she didn't have time to accompany me, so she asked you two to help me as advisors. Zhao Xiaoshu frowned and said, but, we just confessed yesterday, and Sister Zhuangxuan asked us to come out with you today. I always feel something is wrong. Sun Yumeng also nodded repeatedly and said, yes, I also feel that Mr. Lin is weird. Su Weifeng coughed lightly and said, it's really nothing. You should think about it first. What is the best gift to buy for a girl? Zhao Xiaoshu grabbed Su Weifeng's arm and shook it lightly, pouting and said, Brother Su, just tell us, otherwise we really don't know. How can we help you choose things? Su Weifeng turned his head and looked at Sun Yumeng. Sun Yumeng smiled bitterly. It was obvious that Lin Zhuangxuan's sudden change not only did not reassure her, but made her even more worried. Su Weifeng had no choice but to say, I can tell you clearly that Zhuangxuan really doesn't blame you, and what? Zhao Xiaoshu suddenly became a little excited. Su Weifeng said, and she will also treat you as friends. Zhao Xiaoshu bit her lip and said, Sister Zhuangxuan won't support you to open a harem, right? Su Weifeng's eyes widened, and he stared at Zhao Xiaoshu in amazement. Zhao Xiaoshu's hand holding Su Weifeng's arm also tightened, and he said excitedly, did I get it right? Su Weifeng grinned. What kind of brain is Zhao Xiaoshu? How could he guess it right? But he still said vaguely, you are worthy of being a novelist. Your imagination is really big. Zhao Xiaoshu smiled and said, I've read some novels that are written like this. Su Weifeng snorted and said, you think too much. That's just a novel. How can it be like this in reality? Oh. Zhao Xiaoshu stuck out his tongue, blinked his eyes, and said, Yumeng, I want to go to the bathroom. Can you accompany me? Sun Yumeng was about to say that she didn't want to go, but saw Zhao Xiaoshu secretly winking at her, so she nodded and agreed. The two entered the bathroom. Zhao Xiaoshu saw that there was no one else here, so he immediately grabbed Sun Yumeng's hand and said, what do you think of Sister Zhuangxuan's attitude? What do you think? I'm very grateful for Sister Zhuangxuan's magnanimity. You don't think Sister Zhuangxuan has other ideas, do you? Sister Zhuangxuan is not that kind of person. If she said she doesn't blame us, she probably doesn't blame us. Zhao Xiaoshu shook his head again and said, no, I'm sure that Sister Zhuangxuan doesn't blame us. I mean that Sister Zhuangxuan asked us to come out and accompany Brother Su. Sun Yumeng said even more puzzledly, this matter, she said she didn't have time and asked us to help choose gifts. Zhao Xiaoshu blinked and said, Sister Yumeng, don't you think what I said just now makes sense? What did you say just now? Ah, you mean the harem? Sun Yumeng's face suddenly turned red, but she immediately shook her head vigorously and said, you must be imagining things. How could such a thing exist in reality? Besides, Brother Su is not that kind of person. If he was that kind of person, how could he not tell you? Ahem. Zhao Xiaoshu clenched his fists and said, I know Brother Su is not that kind of person, but Sister Zhuangxuan must have some other meaning for making such arrangements suddenly. Think about what she said when she called us and asked Brother Su to buy things for us as well. If it wasn't for Brother Su's relationship with us to get better and better, would she have bought things for us? How could you buy things for a girl unless the relationship is very special? Doesn't Sister Zhuangxuan understand this? Sun Yumeng thought about what Zhao Xiaoshu said, and it seemed that there really was something strange about it. Also, Big Brother Su has said that he will be back in less than 2 years. Not only us, but even Sister Zhuangxuan will not be able to be with Big Brother Su in the end. I'm afraid Sister Zhuangxuan may not have the idea of monopolizing Big Brother Su. Yeah, Big Brother Su only has this much time. Even if Sister Zhuangxuan doesn't care who Big Brother Su is with, there is no need to encourage us to be with Big Brother Su. This may be another reason, and it should be a very special reason. Anyway, according to my intuition, Sister Zhuangxuan should mean this. Sun Yumeng still shook her head, frowned, and said, Xiaoshu, Sister Zhuangxuan has been so good to us. I advise you not to have any other thoughts. It will only let Sister Zhuangxuan down. Zhao Xiaoshu stuck out his tongue and said, I understand what you mean, and I absolutely don't want to let Sister Zhuangxuan down. But if Sister Zhuangxuan really has this idea, if we do nothing, wouldn't that be a real letdown to Sister Zhuangxuan? Sun Yumeng's mouth twitched and said, if Sister Zhuangxuan really means this, then will you really be with Big Brother Su? Zhao Xiaoshu nodded vigorously and said firmly, yes, I like Brother Su. If there is such an opportunity, I will be willing to be with him, even if it is only for 2 short years. Sun Yumeng was a little stunned. She felt that Zhao Xiaoshu's idea was a little terrible. It completely went against her view of love. Zhao Xiaoshu looked at Sun Yumeng and said, Sister Yumeng, don't you want to be with Brother Su? Sun Yumeng hesitated for a moment and said, I like Brother Su, but I don't have to be with him. As long as I can see him, see that he is happy, and know that he is safe and happy, then I will be very happy. Zhao Xiaoshu asked again, what if you have the opportunity to be with Brother Su? For example, in the way I said, will you be with Brother Su? Sun Yumeng was entangled for a moment. After a long while, she smiled bitterly and said, I don't know. Sister Yumeng, maybe we have different philosophies on love. I love simply, and you love purely. But if it is really as I guessed, I still hope you will be with us. Really? Sun Yumeng chuckled and said, first of all, you have to make sure that this is true, but I don't think it is likely. Okay, don't think too much. We are here to accompany Brother Su to buy gifts this time, and we must get this done. Okay. Zhao Xiaoshu agreed happily and walked out holding Sun Yumeng's hand. Chapter 465. There are always people who feel good about themselves. Sorry to have kept you waiting for so long, Brother Su. As soon as he came out, Zhao Xiaoshu came to Su Weifeng with a smile. Su Weifeng smiled and said, "It's okay, let's go." Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng followed Su Weifeng forward a few steps and said, "Then let's get down to business. You said you want to buy something for a girl. Does her family have money? What does she look like? What does she like?" Su Weifeng shrugged his shoulders and said, "It's Xu Lingling, the boss of the company opposite our house. Her family is very rich." Zhao Xiaoshu had also seen Xu Lingling, but he didn't know who she was before. Thinking about it now, he said, "In my impression, she is a beautiful woman with a strong aura. What about her preferences?" Su Weifeng shook his head and said, "I don't know her preferences." Zhao Xiaoshu said helplessly, "You don't know anything. How can you buy something she likes?" Sun Yumeng nodded repeatedly and said, "It should depend on the intention. It depends on what Brother Su wants to express. If it is just a simple birthday gift without any special meaning, then it doesn't matter what you buy. But if you want to express something special, you have to put in some effort." Su Weifeng was really confused. Zhao Xiaoshu narrowed his eyes and said, "Does it have any special meaning, such as showing affection? Or pursuing?" Su Weifeng twitched his mouth and said, "No, just buy something that a girl can use. There is no need for so many meanings." Zhao Xiaoshu saw a special meaning in Su Weifeng's eyes, which further confirmed his idea. He said, "Girls usually like bags, clothes or jewelry. She should have no shortage of bags and clothes and jewelry, but there are too many styles of jewelry. Why not choose some jewelry?" Su Weifeng nodded immediately and said, "Okay, let's buy some jewelry." The three of them came to the jewelry area. Although Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu also liked jewelry, they usually went to those fashionable small jewelry stores, where the things were all worth dozens of yuan, and even hundreds of yuan. They had never been to such a big brand jewelry store. After entering a Bulgari international brand store, the two of them were shocked by the prices of the jewelry inside. Even a small necklace here costs more than 10,000 yuan. A slightly better one costs tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands, and there are also many that cost hundreds of thousands. Sun Yumeng stuck out her tongue and whispered to Zhao Xiaoshu, "This is too expensive. My god, I didn't know these jewelry could be so expensive." Zhao Xiaoshu also grinned and said, "Yes, this thing doesn't look like gold. How can it be so expensive? For ordinary people, gold is a precious metal, and jewelry is also the first choice of gold. It can also maintain its value. For jewelry like this, that doesn't look very eye-catching, they really can't imagine why this thing is so expensive. Puchy, a few country bumpkins, you compare Bulgari jewelry with gold, you really haven't seen the world." The two people's voices were not loud, but two customers happened to come over and heard Zhao Xiaoshu's words. You just smiled and walked over, and then one of the women immediately made a sarcastic remark. Then the other woman also laughed and said, "There are many people like this. If this kind of store doesn't receive a batch of people one day, they just enjoy the sight, but they don't have money to buy." If Lin Zhuangxuan was here, she would definitely say something back. But Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu are not people of that kind. Sun Yumeng is easygoing. She always smiles back at others. Although Zhao Xiaoshu is a little stronger than her, she has always been poor and looked down upon by others. Although she feels uncomfortable, she pretends not to hear it. Su Weifeng frowned and saw that the two did not mean to care about it. He was too lazy to make trouble. As a grown man, he didn't need to quarrel with two women, so he didn't say anything. After the two women finished speaking, they didn't take Su Weifeng and the others seriously at all. They walked in directly and started to choose things. After calming down, Zhao Xiaoshu took out his phone and checked it. He said, "It seems that this brand is almost the best among jewelry. If we want to choose, we should choose it here first." Su Weifeng said, "Okay, then you can take a look. The price doesn't matter. As long as it feels good, it's fine." Sun Yumeng knew that Su Weifeng had a lot of money and that Xu Lingling had a lot of cooperation with Su Weifeng. After a brief discussion with Zhao Xiaoshu, she started to pick it seriously. The jewelry worth tens of thousands of yuan was obviously not suitable for Xu Lingling's status. The two of them went straight to the jewelry worth hundreds of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of yuan. The service attitude of the clerk here was still good. Although they could see that Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu were the kind of girls who had not seen much of the world, the calm and composed look of Su Weifeng next to them made the clerk dare not underestimate them. Zhao Xiaoshu and Sun Yumeng rarely had such an opportunity. At this time, they inevitably had a desire to try. The two of them would also pick some things they liked and try to wear them. Hey, are you done yet? Why are you trying things here if you don't want to buy anything? That's right, you're just occupying the toilet and delaying our selection, don't you know? The two women who had such bad mouths just now actually came over again. Both of them frowned, looking at Su Weifeng and his friends, as if they saw a fly. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu subconsciously wanted to make room for them. Su Weifeng's face sank, and he said, don't pay attention to them, just pick your own. One of the two women had long hair, and the other had short hair. Both of them were dressed gorgeously, and they looked rich. The long-haired woman curled her lips and said, pick? You really dare to use that word? Will you buy after you pick? The short-haired woman chuckled and said, boy, this kind of place is not a place to bring girls out to show off, and you can't afford it, so just pretend for a while, and go wherever you want to stay. Su Weifeng snorted and said, this is my business, you don't have to worry about it. The long-haired woman glared and said, boy, don't be shameless, get out of here. Su Weifeng laughed at this time and said, what if I don't? What can you do to me? The manager of the store saw the dispute here and hurried over. You are all VIPs in our store. If you have any dissatisfaction, please tell me, I will definitely satisfy you. The long-haired woman curled her lips disdainfully and said, manager, what are you doing? You treat people who can't afford it as VIPs, but you make us who really want to buy look down on you. Don't you want to do this business well? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 466, No Partiality. The manager smiled and said, whether they can buy now or not, they are still customers of our store. If they don't buy now, but like our brand, they will have the opportunity to buy in the future. They are all our potential customers. We can't offend any customer who comes here. The long-haired woman snorted and said, potential customers? They are looking at jewelry worth hundreds of thousands of yuan. People like them can't make so much money in their lifetime. What can they buy with? The short-haired woman curled her lips and said, anyway, you can do whatever you want. We want to buy a few things today. If you have this attitude, then we won't buy. The manager still smiled and said, you two should feel uncomfortable looking at the jewelry here. This is easy to handle. Please go to the VIP room. We will provide you with the best service. If you want to choose any jewelry, we will send the best jewelry to you in the VIP room. The long-haired woman pointed to the ones that Sun Yumeng and the others were looking at and said, okay, then we want these jewelry. You can send them all over. The manager hurriedly said, most of these jewelry have the same style. We will send them over immediately. The long-haired woman then said, that's about right. Oh, and there's also one that only comes in one piece. Send that over, too. The manager said, okay, we'll try to arrange it for you too. The two were about to follow the manager over when the long-haired woman suddenly saw the bracelet that Sun Yumeng was trying on and asked, do you have more of this one? The manager said, this one is a limited edition, limited to 100 pieces worldwide, and we only have this one. The long-haired woman immediately said, then why don't you ask her to take it off quickly? I want this one. Sun Yumeng's hands were white and delicate, and the bracelet on her wrist was a perfect match. It was unclear whether the bracelet made Sun Yumeng's hands look better, or whether Sun Yumeng's hands made the bracelet more beautiful. The manager immediately looked at Sun Yumeng in embarrassment. Sun Yumeng instinctively wanted to take the bracelet off immediately. Su Weifeng held her hand down all of a sudden and said calmly, no need to take it off. I think you look very good in this. Let's buy it. The long-haired woman was immediately furious and said, bye. Boy, you are really trying to pick a fight with me, right? Okay, then buy it. Buy it now. I want to see if you can afford it. The short-haired woman also snorted coldly and said, pay up quickly. Why are you pretending to be cool here if you have no money? Su Weifeng snorted and ignored the two women, but looked at the manager and said, in your store, do you have to pay for each item you choose? The manager immediately said, of course not. Customers can pay before leaving the store. Su Weifeng then looked at the two women and said, did you hear me? Pa. The long-haired woman's mouth was grinning to her ears in disdain. She said, you are still waiting to check out. Do you want to wait until we leave before you leave with your tail between your legs? Well, then we will fight you. I want to see how you leave this store. The manager was also quite helpless and said, two distinguished guests, let's go to the VIP room. The two women were also quite stubborn. They sat aside and looked at Su Weifeng and the others with their shoulders raised. No, we will watch them here today. We want to see if they buy it. Su Weifeng ignored them and said to Zhao Xiaoshu, Yu Meng's one is very suitable. You can also pick one. Ah, one is not enough. Zhao Xiaoshu asked in confusion. Su Weifeng smiled and said, oh, that Yu Meng looks more beautiful, so I bought it for her. I bought it for her. Of course, I can't be partial to one and buy one for you too. Buy, for me. Zhao Xiaoshu was so excited that he stuttered. Su Weifeng's smile deepened, and he said, well, pick what you like. Sun Yumeng said anxiously at this time, brother Su, this won't do, it's too expensive. Puff. The two women laughed, and they laughed so hard that they were bent over. Pretend. Pretend well. This play is well acted. The man pretends to be cool, and the woman does this. It's really fun. Su Weifeng said to Sun Yumeng, you heard it. Don't you want me to be looked down upon? Sun Yumeng hesitated for a moment, and then nodded. Zhao Xiaoshu was somewhat obedient to Sun Yumeng. Seeing Sun Yumeng nod, she also happily picked out a bracelet from the selection. She liked this one just now, but she wasn't buying it for herself, so she had been holding back. Hey, won't you pick a little longer? Yes, you picked it so quickly, then you have to pay. The two women mocked again. Su Weifeng handed a card to the waiter and said, go and pay. The clerk took the card and went to pay. The two women spoke again. Guess what will happen in a while? Sir, your card balance is insufficient. Do you have any other cards? Yes. He will definitely say, oh, I'm so sorry, I brought the wrong card when I went out. I'm going back to get the card now and come back later. Haha. After saying that, the two laughed unscrupulously. Soon, the clerk took the receipt and respectfully said to Su Weifeng, sir, please sign. Su Weifeng picked up the pen very happily and signed the receipt directly. The two women came over immediately. The long-haired woman frowned and said, wait, what do you want to sign? What are you doing? The clerk smiled and said, this gentleman has already paid. The bank slip must be signed by this gentleman. What? He really bought it? That's impossible. How could he have so much money? Don't be fooled. The clerk said politely, this is correct. This gentleman's bank card is in good condition. We have successfully received the payment. Su Weifeng saw that the clerk wanted to take out a jewelry box or something, so he shook his head and refused, saying, no, just take it like this. Then he didn't even look at the two women, took Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu's hands, and walked out. The two women stood there at this time, their faces extremely ugly. They couldn't believe it. How could someone who they thought couldn't afford it? This mentality is really mysterious and self-confident, and no one can explain it clearly. Humph, he's just an avo rich with some money. He can't compare to us at all. We want to enter the big family. That's right, if we can enter the Shu family this time, we can kill him with just a word. It's better not to let us meet him again in the future. Chapter 467 I'll buy it for you, if you like it. After walking out of the store and walking a distance, Sun Yumeng peeked back, then heaved a sigh of relief and said to Su Weifeng, brother Su, after they leave, we will go to the store to ask for a jewelry box, otherwise it will not seem so formal if we take it as a gift. Su Weifeng shook his head and said, this is for you. Why do you want a jewelry box? Ah. Sun Yumeng opened her mouth in surprise and stammered, no, we can't take such an expensive thing. Su Weifeng chuckled and said, "You have already bought it, why can't you take it? And I think you look really good in it." Sun Yumeng looked at the bracelet on her wrist, shook her head repeatedly, and said, "It's too expensive, more than 400,000. I dare not take it." Zhao Xiaoshu bit her lip, pulled Sun Yumeng's arm, and said, "Brother Su said it was a gift for us, so we should keep it." Su Weifeng nodded and said, "Xiaoshu is right. I bought this for you. In fact, after I came in, I felt that this kind of thing was not appropriate to give Xu Lingling. There is a jade shop over there. Let's go there and have a look. Gold has a price, but jade is priceless. Giving her a jade product may be more meaningful." Sun Yumeng said in a panic. But, Su Weifeng simply held her little hand and walked forward, saying, "There is no but. Don't forget, the two of us won more than 100 million in the provincial capital. What's the big deal about spending this little money on you?" Seeing that Su Weifeng was so determined, Sun Yumeng knew that it was useless to refuse again, but she was extremely uneasy. After receiving such a valuable gift from Su Weifeng, she really didn't know how to repay him. At this time, Zhao Xiaoshu whispered, "Brother Su, do you think I'm materialistic?" Su Weifeng shook his head and said, "If you were a materialistic girl, I'm afraid it wouldn't be my turn to give you such a gift." Zhao Xiaoshu smiled happily and said, "Brother Su, then I'm relieved. First, I really like this bracelet. Second, this is the first gift Brother Su gave me. No matter how valuable it is, it has special meaning." Su Weifeng turned his head and looked at Sun Yumeng and said, "Yumeng, you should learn from Xiaoshu on this point. Don't be too picky about some things. Brother Su doesn't give you things because he wants you to give him something in return. Besides, you have helped me make so much money, and you deserve some rewards." Sun Yumeng smiled bitterly again and said, "If it was a cheaper item, I wouldn't feel any burden if I accepted it, but this, I'm afraid I won't dare to take it out in the future." Su Weifeng smiled and said, "You really don't have to worry about this. Don't mention how good the public security in our country is. Basically, it is difficult for robberies to happen. Even if there are real robberies, their eyes are basically on those who carry gold. For things like this, those people don't know the goods at all, so they won't become their targets." Sun Yumeng thought for a while, then smiled and said, "What you said makes sense. If I carry this, even if others can recognize the brand, they will definitely think that I'm carrying a fake." Su Weifeng laughed and said, "Then I will strive to make everyone see the things you carry one day, and even if they are fakes, they will think they are real." The three people came to the jade shop happily. It is true that gold has a price, but jade is priceless. The things here are cheap, expensive, and even ridiculously expensive. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu looked at these things and liked them very much. Su Weifeng asked them to pick something they liked. However, both of them knew their limits and were not greedy. They had already received such a great benefit today. They would not buy the things in it, whether they liked it or not. They were all wholeheartedly choosing gifts for Xu Lingling. Finally, Su Weifeng chose a full green jade pendant. Although it was not big, it actually cost almost 1 million. Jade is a non-renewable resource. It is becoming less and less, so the price is getting higher and higher, especially this kind of full green jade, which is extremely expensive. This is almost 2 million, and it was spent in a short while. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu gnashed their teeth when they thought about it. But Su Weifeng didn't even blink. Money is just a number to him now, and he doesn't want to leave much for his parents. His parents have always thought that a small fortune is enough for them. Leaving them 18 million is enough for them to live a rich life. If they give them too much, they will live a hard life and don't know how to live. 2 years later, Su Weifeng will return to the army. In the army, he actually doesn't need any money at all. There is enough funding for carrying out missions. In addition, his mercenary group outside also gave him a lot of wealth. So now Su Weifeng just spends the money he has at will. Before he goes to the army, if there is no special need, he will basically donate all of it. However, Su Weifeng did not tell anyone about this idea, because others might think that he will never come back after he goes out, which is a waste of time. After shopping, it was not yet 3 o'clock. Su Weifeng thought that when he went back to the company, Lin Zhuangxuan might say that he was not good at dealing with things, so he simply took Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu to go shopping in the clothing store. Sun Yumeng's conditions have improved in the past 2 months, and she can't wear too bad clothes for work, so she has been to general brand stores. Zhao Xiaoshu has been living a hard life in the past few years. She has not been willing to spend the money for writing novels and scripts, so she has never been to these places. Now visiting such a big brand fashion store, plus Su Weifeng is with them, the two are really happy. Looking at the two little beauties wearing different styles of clothes, showing different styles and temperaments of beauty, Su Weifeng is also full of praise. Okay, let's go. Sun Yumeng had almost finished trying on clothes in this store, so she went to change her clothes and walked out. Girls try on clothes, but it doesn't mean they will buy them. This is not only the case for girls themselves, but also for people in the clothing store. However, seeing Su Weifeng holding several bags of clothes in his hands, Sun Yumeng asked in confusion, "Brother Su, when did you buy so many?" Su Weifeng smiled slightly and said, "Just bought." Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu looked at the trademarks on the bags and immediately understood something. Sun Yumeng smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Su, we were just trying them on. Why did you buy them?" Su Weifeng smiled and said, "I saw that you looked good in them, so I bought them directly and gave them to you to change into." Sun Yumeng looked at Su Weifeng with a flustered look in her eyes. She felt that what Zhao Xiaoshu said was actually a bit true. Chapter 468 Zhao Xiaoshu's test. Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu didn't dare to try anything casually at this time. Anyway, they had bought so much today, so they just went home. When Su Weifeng sent them back, it was not yet 4 o'clock, and there was still time. At the invitation of the two, they went to Sun Yumeng's house. Su Weifeng sat down, watching Sun Yumeng and Zhao Xiaoshu looking at the bags of clothes from time to time, and couldn't help but smile. "Now that you have bought them, you can put them away." Zhao Xiaoshu stuck out his tongue and said, "Brother Su, I want to try the new clothes." "Okay." Su Weifeng said, "If you want to try it. What's wrong with that? Then let's go try it." Zhao Xiaoshu said, pulling Sun Yumeng and carrying a bunch of bags into the bedroom. Girls buy new clothes. In addition to trying them in the store, they often have to go home and try them carefully. After all, they have to consider the matching inside, as well as shoes and so on. They are always not satisfied in the store. Lin Zhuangxuan and Qiao Yushan were very simple about buying clothes. After buying them, they basically wore them when they wanted to. This might be due to their family environment or their personalities. After a while, Zhao Xiaoshu came out first. She was wearing beautiful clothes, which made her look young and beautiful. She came directly to Su Weifeng and said expectantly, "Brother Su, do you think it looks good?" "It looks good." Su Weifeng nodded repeatedly and said, "You are beautiful. This dress looks good on you. How can I have it?" Zhao Xiaoshu immediately twisted her waist shyly. Sun Yumeng also came out at this time, looking pure and beautiful. Looking at the two people standing together, Su Weifeng felt that his eyes were not enough and said, "Not bad, not bad. It seems that the money spent this time is really worth it. Pretty girls like you really need beautiful clothes to match, otherwise it would be a waste of talent." It was the first time that Sun Yumeng heard Su Weifeng praise her like this. At this time, she was also shy and said, "We can never compare to sister-in-law and sister Zhuangxuan." Zhao Xiaoshu also nodded repeatedly and said, "We are just little girls. Sister Zhuangxuan and sister-in-law are real women. We will never be able to compare with their temperament in a lifetime." Su Weifeng smiled and said, "Don't belittle yourselves. Different people have different temperaments. They are both strong women in their careers, but you are not developing in this direction. You are the kind of girls whose cultural accomplishment will become higher and higher, and who are more and more bookish. This kind of girl has another kind of charming temperament." Zhao Xiaoshu's eyes lit up and said, "Brother Su, do you like this kind of temperament?" "Of course I like it too." Su Weifeng regretted saying this. Why is he so casual with them now? It was not like this before. It must be what Zhuangxuan said to him last night. Even though he did not agree, the defense line in his heart loosened involuntarily, and he even did what Lin Zhuangxuan said. Zhao Xiaoshu pursed his lips and said, "Brother Su, I will definitely work hard. I will definitely study hard and write novels hard. I will definitely become what you said in the future. Su Weifeng smiled lightly and said, I'm afraid that you will become a great writer in the future, and I won't have the chance to see it. The implication was to remind Zhao Xiaoshu that he would leave here in 2 years. Zhao Xiaoshu could understand, of course, bit her lip and said, Brother Su, even if you return to the army, it doesn't mean you will never come back. There will always be a few days of home leave in a year. Even if you can look at me at that time, I will try my best to do it. Su Weifeng was really touched. Zhao Xiaoshu was a girl who was brave enough to express her feelings, and he could also feel that Zhao Xiaoshu's words were definitely from the heart, not a hypocritical expression. But, why did it feel like Zhao Xiaoshu had become much bolder? It was clearly agreed that she would just be a sister, but now she had a tendency to develop further with him. Su Weifeng didn't think that this girl was going back on her word. This was definitely a hint from Lin Zhuangxuan to them, which Zhao Xiaoshu keenly caught. Alas. Su Weifeng sighed secretly in his heart. It was a bit ridiculous to do this, but his injuries could only be healed in this special way, so he had to consider accepting this way. Brother Su, what's wrong with you? Zhao Xiaoshu looked at Su Weifeng nervously. Su Weifeng shook his head and said, it's nothing. You are still young and have a bright future. There are more beautiful things waiting for you to pursue. Don't think you have eaten all the fruits just by picking a date. Zhao Xiaoshu raised his chin and said, this date is the sweetest and most fragrant in the world. No matter how good the fruit is, it can't attract me. I just want this date. Sun Yumeng stared at Su Weifeng and Zhao Xiaoshu in amazement. How could she not understand what these two people meant? She was surprised at Zhao Xiaoshu's boldness at this time, and now she was looking forward to Su Weifeng's response. Su Weifeng looked at Zhao Xiaoshu, then at Sun Yumeng, then shook his head gently, smiled and said, the jujubes have been eaten, so they have no taste. Why do you want to taste them again? Zhao Xiaoshu pouted and said, even if only the jujube kernels are left, I will treat them as treasures, and hold them in my mouth every day to taste them. Su Weifeng was dumbfounded for a moment, and after a long while, he gave a thumbs up and said, you really deserve to be able to write novels. You can say such words, and they are so meaningful. Sun Yumeng thought about it, and couldn't help laughing, especially when she saw Su Weifeng's helpless expression, which was even more interesting. Zhao Xiaoshu's eyes suddenly lit up at this time, and then he jumped directly to Su Weifeng's side and sat down, holding Su Weifeng's arm tightly, and said excitedly, Brother Su, am I right? What do you mean? Su Weifeng asked in a confused manner. It's about your harem. Zhao Xiaoshu said it so smoothly. Su Weifeng's face turned dark, and he said, you make me sound like an emperor. How could I have that ability? You're overthinking. Zhao Xiaoshu added, then at least you don't mind me being with you, and Sister Zhuangxuan doesn't mind either, right? Su Weifeng opened his mouth and wanted to deny it, but Zhao Xiaoshu immediately said excitedly, Brother Su, you hesitated, and you were thinking about how to explain it to me, so what I said was right. This is what happened. I can be with Brother Su. Su Weifeng's face turned a little dark. Sometimes it saves effort to talk to smart people, but when you want to hide something from others, that smart person will expose your lies in one go. Chapter 469. He doesn't have an invitation. Su Weifeng seemed to be ready to flee. He felt that if he continued to talk to Zhao Xiaoshu, he would really have to admit it. After Su Weifeng ran away, Zhao Xiaoshu excitedly grabbed Sun Yumeng's arm and said, Yumeng, this is true. You saw it. This is absolutely true. We can be with Brother Su. Sun Yumeng was definitely more rational than Zhao Xiaoshu. Although she was also subconsciously excited by Zhao Xiaoshu, she sobered up immediately. Pulling Zhao Xiaoshu to sit down, she said, Xiaoshu, you can't do this. What's wrong? Sister Zhuangxuan supports us to be with Brother Su, so we have nothing to worry about. Sun Yumeng shook her head and said, if it were someone else, maybe you could do it boldly. I don't understand why Brother Su has such an idea, and I don't know why Sister Zhuangxuan agrees to this. There is definitely a very special and helpless reason, but Brother Su obviously hasn't accepted this from the bottom of his heart. He is resisting. It's too obvious that you are doing this, and it will put Brother Su under psychological pressure. Zhao Xiaoshu exclaimed, oh, you're right. I was only concerned about my own excitement, and I only thought that as long as Sister Zhuangxuan agreed, I could be with Brother Su, but I overlooked that Brother Su is not that kind of scumbag. He won't take it just because I offer it to him. Yes, and I'm really worried now. Why do Sister Zhuangxuan and Brother Su have such ideas? Then, could it be that Sister Zhuangxuan, that what? Sun Yumeng's brain is actually not as active as Zhao Xiaoshu's. Zhao Xiaoshu lowered his voice, as if afraid that others would hear him, and said, is there something wrong with Sister Zhuangxuan's health that makes her unable to have children? Ah, no way. Sun Yumeng was immediately shocked. Zhao Xiaoshu said seriously, think about it, why is this happening? I feel like Sister Zhuangxuan might want us to have a baby for Brother Su. No way. Sun Yumeng's eyes widened. Zhao Xiaoshu touched his chin, looking thoughtful, and said, I feel that apart from this reason, I really can't find a more reasonable reason. Sun Yumeng shook her head and said, I don't think it's likely. Sister Zhuangxuan is in good health and likes sports. Whether you can have a baby has nothing to do with whether your body is healthy. Some women are born unable to have children. Sun Yumeng took a deep breath, and then let her brain clear up. After a while, she said, no, if this is really the reason, Sister Zhuangxuan would not be like this, because this itself is a kind of harm to us, and Sister Zhuangxuan is not the kind of person who only considers herself and not us. This. Zhao Xiaoshu thought for a while and said, now that you put it that way, I feel that this reason doesn't seem to hold. Sun Yumeng nodded vigorously and said, and there is my sister-in-law. Sister Zhuangxuan can't have a baby, so can't my sister-in-law have a baby too? That's right, it's impossible for both of them to be so coincidental. Oh, look, doesn't this prove my guess even more that my sister-in-law and Sister Zhuangxuan are both with Brother Su? Sun Yumeng knocked Zhao Xiaoshu on the head and said, you always think about it this way. Brother Su has said that he and sister-in-law are fake husband and wife. They pretended to be husband and wife first, and then met Sister Zhuangxuan, and then fell in love with Sister Zhuangxuan. Zhao Xiaoshu immediately asked, then tell me, does sister-in-law know that Brother Su likes Sister Zhuangxuan? This, I'm not sure, but I believe that Brother Su can handle these things. In short, you should not mess around, so as not to add burden to Brother Su. If Brother Su really has such an idea, he will tell you clearly. This made Zhao Xiaoshu lose his temper immediately, and said, okay, then I'll listen to you. Xu Lingling's birthday party was held in a villa of her own family. This villa is not in the city, but on a small hill in the suburbs. The hill can't actually be called a hill, it's just a small hill, close to the city, surrounded by trees, and the air quality is particularly good. But new houses are no longer allowed here, and these villas that existed earlier are more valuable. Those who can own a villa here are definitely rich or noble, not ordinary people can own one. Considering that there is a high probability of drinking at a birthday party, Su Weifeng did not drive. For Su Weifeng, as long as he is not really drunk, the effect of alcohol will not affect his reaction speed or his driving skills, and there will be no problem with safety. But if he is caught by the police for drunk driving, his parents will also lose face, so Su Weifeng is still very careful about these. He called a car and stopped in front of the gate of the villa, and Su Weifeng got out of the car directly. The gate of the villa was open, but there were security guards at the door, and there were also people from the Xu family who were responsible for receiving guests. If there were important guests, they would take people in. When Su Weifeng arrived, the person in charge of reception walked in with two guests. A Mercedes-Benz G stopped in front of the gate of the villa. When Su Weifeng got out of the car, there were 4 people sitting inside, 2 men in the front and 2 women in the back. The car window was open, and the 2 women saw Su Weifeng immediately. Oh my god, this guy actually came here too. Is this guy related to the Xu family? The man in the front co-pilot turned around and said, do you know him? The long-haired woman curled her lips and said, that guy is the pretentious guy I met at Bulgari today. Who knew he would come here? The man said with a sullen face, humph, pretending in front of you, that's really not a good idea. The man sitting in the co-pilot seat is called Li Dongming. He is a distant relative of the Xu family. Because of his relationship with the Xu family, he is doing well. In order to get on the Xu family's big ship better, he also took great pains. The two people brought today, the long-haired woman is called Li Xiaoyu, and the short-haired one is Li Xiaoyu's best friend Cheng Fengying. Cheng Fengying's family conditions are also good, but compared with the people of the Shu family, it is too much worse. Today, Li Dongming wants to introduce them to Shu Lingling's brothers. If they can really be favored by the Shu brothers, then they can truly enter the Shu family and get greater benefits from the Shu family. After showing the invitation to the security guard, the car was about to drive forward. But Li Xiaoyu's eyes immediately lit up and said, "Wait, let's see something interesting. It seems that the guy doesn't have an invitation. It seems to be true." The security guard stopped him. "Let's go down and take a look." Chapter 470 Distinguished Guests. Do you still need an invitation? Su Weifeng was quite surprised. Shu Lingling hadn't told him about this. The security guard was about to explain, but Li Xiaoyu and Cheng Fengying had already walked over. Li Xiaoyu curled her lips and said, "What do you think? This is the famous Shu family. Do you think you can just get into the Shu family just because you have some money?" Cheng Fengying said disdainfully, "A bumpkin is a bumpkin. Even if you have some money, you can't get rid of your identity as a bumpkin." Li Xiaoyu immediately added, "That's right. If you want to make friends with the Shu family, you can't just have some money. You have to have enough status and position. Now you know the gap between us, right?" Cheng Fengying didn't wait for Li Xiaoyu to finish her words and immediately took over, saying, "The invitation from the Shu family, anyone can get it. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? Do you have the qualifications to attend Shu Lingling's birthday party?" Su Weifeng looked at the two women and was also a little speechless. Why are these two women everywhere? How can Shu Lingling have such friends? The security guard interrupted and said, "Please don't talk nonsense. We have some distinguished guests, but they don't have invitations. Sir, please wait a moment. The person who is responsible for welcoming the distinguished guests has just entered and will be out soon." Su Weifeng nodded, not wanting to pay attention to the two ungrateful women. Li Xiaoyu stretched out her voice again and said in a yin-yang tone, "Hey, you are still here and don't want to leave. Do you have to wait for others to drive you away?" Cheng Fengying chuckled and said, "He may be waiting for a miracle, or he thinks of himself as a big shot." "Big shot, haha." Li Xiaoyu laughed and said, "Have you ever seen a big shot who came by taxi? Which big shot didn't come in a luxury car? Look at the cars in this courtyard. Is there any car worth less than 1 million? Cheng Fengying smiled and said, "Yes, then it's not easy to pretend." Su Weifeng still ignored them. In his eyes, these two people were just two jumping clowns. If he had the same knowledge as them, it would be an insult to his status. At this time, Li Dongming hurriedly pulled the two of them and said, "Okay, let's go in quickly. I'll take you to meet some important friends." Li Xiaoyu waved at Su Weifeng, chuckled, and said, "That big shot, we are waiting for you inside. Don't let us down." The two speechless women just walked in, and a Shu family member came out to greet the guests. Seeing Su Weifeng at a glance, he hurriedly stepped forward and said respectfully, "Hello, Mr. Su. The young lady is greeting guests inside. It is really inconvenient to come out to greet Mr. Su. Please forgive me." Su Weifeng smiled slightly and said, "Lingling is having a birthday today. It's normal to be busy. Then Mr. Su, please follow me." The main venue of Shu Yingying's birthday party was on the lawn in the villa yard. The guests who arrived first were now gathered in groups of 3 or 5 to chat, and they were basically young people who were no more than 30 years old. Su Weifeng was taken directly into the villa and entered a study on the second floor. The lady specifically told me that Mr. Su doesn't like to interact with those people, so I brought him here. "Mr. Su, please take a seat. I'll go and inform the lady right away." Su Weifeng was quite satisfied with Shu Lingling's arrangement. Although he was also a young man, he really didn't like this kind of useless socializing. It was Lin Zuangxuan's request to come to Shu Lingling's birthday party, otherwise he would have just given her a gift and left. Then there's no need. Let her be busy. I'll just sit here. Okay, then I have to tell the lady too. Otherwise, if the lady knows you're here and I didn't inform her, she'll definitely blame me. Su Weifeng was sitting in the living room drinking half a cup of tea when Shu Lingling rushed in and pounced directly on Su Weifeng. Su Weifeng stretched out his hand to block Xu Lingling and said with a smile, "Stop, there's no need to be so enthusiastic." Xu Lingling pouted and said, "Today is my birthday, can't you let me be unrestrained for once? Not even a hug? This, okay." After receiving this big invitation, Su Weifeng had no choice but to open his arms. Xu Lingling hugged Su Weifeng tightly, then let go. She did not stay in Su Weifeng's arms, then said with a smile on her face, "Ha, you really came to celebrate my birthday?" Su Weifeng smiled slightly and said, "I have already promised you, how could I go back on my word?" Xu Lingling giggled happily and said, "I like this. This is what a man should do. A spit is a nail." Su Weifeng took out a small box and said, "Happy birthday. There is also a gift." Xu Lingling took the box and said, "Can I open it now?" Of course. After Xu Lingling opened it, her eyes lit up and she said, "What a beautiful jade pendant. I like it so much." After taking out the jade pendant and examining it carefully, Xu Lingling took off a necklace that was originally on her neck and said, "I like this. I want to wear this." Su Weifeng said with a smile, "Haha, then you wear it." Xu Lingling straightened her chest, looked at Su Weifeng with expectant eyes, and said, "Please put it on for me." Su Weifeng couldn't refuse this reason, and it wasn't a big deal, so he reached out and took the jade pendant. Xu Lingling turned around immediately, and Su Weifeng put his arms around her and put the jade pendant around her neck. Xu Lingling turned around nimbly, squinting her eyes and said, "Does it look good?" "It looks good." Su Weifeng nodded without hesitation. Xu Lingling looked down at the jade pendant on her chest and said with a smile, "The size you bought is just right. This jade pendant can just touch my chest, just like you touch my chest every day." Su Weifeng's face suddenly turned black, and he said, "Can we not make such a simple thing so ambiguous?" Xu Lingling laughed so hard that she shook her body, pulled Su Weifeng to sit down, and said, "I want to ask you something." "What is it?" Su Weifeng looked at Xu Lingling warily. Xu Lingling said, "It's Lin Zhuangxun. Why did she change her attitude? This really makes me feel a little nervous." Su Weifeng coughed lightly and said, "This is not a good thing. I don't have to worry that she will be unhappy when you come here. Then there must be a reason." "What? She wants to give up on you? That's unlikely. She has always treated you as a treasure." Su Weifeng said, "It's nothing. She just thought it over. Some things can't be watched." "Ha, that's wrong. If you watch, I won't have the chance to steal your beauty. Now I have the chance." Su Weifeng rolled his eyes and said, "Can you be more reserved?" "No." Xu Lingling also answered very straightforwardly. Chapter 471. This is my Xu family's distinguished guest. "Okay, the gift has been delivered. I'll go back." Su Weifeng stood up. "Don't." Xu Lingling quickly pulled him back and said, "If you leave, my birthday party will be ruined. You have to dance the first dance with me later." Su Weifeng frowned and said, "Can you not dance?" Xu Lingling said firmly, "Of course not." Su Weifeng shook his head helplessly and said, "Okay, then I'll stay for a while." "Don't stay here either. It's so boring. The lawn is so lively. Besides, you haven't had dinner yet. You can go there to eat something first." Su Weifeng nodded and said, "Okay, then I'll go downstairs to eat something." The two walked to the door, and Xu Lingling said again, "By the way, ZHU Xiaoxuan will also be here today. You really have a lot of face. Xiaoxuan even came to celebrate your birthday. Then you see, I have a good relationship with Xiaoxuan now. Of course, the most important thing is that you have a lot of face. People come here for you." Su Weifeng coughed lightly and didn't respond. But he couldn't help but think of Lin Zhuangxuan's words in his heart. In the past, when these girls were mentioned, Su Weifeng could handle it calmly, but when Lin Zhuangxuan said that absurd idea, Su Weifeng would always think of all sorts of things when he heard the names of these women. His mood was completely destroyed by Lin Zhuangxuan. By the way, in addition to Lin Zhuangxuan, there is another person who has to take responsibility for this matter. That is Meng Keqing. She was the first to open the barriers in Su Weifeng's heart, and then Lin Zhuangxuan added such a fire, which made his barriers destroyed a lot. After leaving the villa, Su Weifeng came to the food area alone. There were all some self-service things here. Although it was not as rich as the cocktail party in the hotel, there were many varieties of food and they were all very exquisite. Su Weifeng was not polite. He directly picked 2 plates of food and found a seat to sit down and eat. Recently, his body has recovered, and coupled with physical training, his appetite is very large. He has to eat a lot at every meal to replenish his physical energy consumption. Xu Lingling is an only child, but in the Xu family, there are still several cousins. There were also a few people of similar age. Li Dongming had already brought Li Xiaoyu and Cheng Fengying to Xu Lingling's cousin Xu Chengjun. Li Xiaoyu and Cheng Fengying immediately showed their courtesy, and Xu Chengjun showed some interest in Li Xiaoyu. This made Li Dongming and Li Xiaoyu very happy, and they circled around Xu Chengjun. After chatting for a while, Xu Chengjun said, "Let's go get something to eat and talk while we eat." Li Xiaoyu threw a coquettish look at Xu Chengjun and said, "Mr. Xu, you are so thoughtful. I was hungry and was too embarrassed to ask for help, but you helped me think of it." Xu Chengjun laughed and said, "It's our fault that this beautiful woman is hungry." Several people came to the food area and were picking things. Li Xiaoyu's eyes fell on Su Weifeng again, and he was stunned. "What's wrong?" Xu Chengjun asked. "Mr. Xu, I saw a guy sneaking in." "Sneaking in? Is there anyone who dares to sneak into our Xu family?" Xu Chengjun's eyes widened immediately. "Absolutely. That guy is just a bumpkin. He came here by taxi without even an invitation. Look at him sitting there. There are so many food in front of him. He is just here to eat and drink for free." Xu Chengjun looked in the direction of Li Xiaoyu's finger and saw a man eating with his head down. He couldn't see his face clearly, but as Li Xiaoyu said, everyone who comes here is rich and powerful. They are used to eating delicacies from land and sea. Even if the food is delicious, they only eat 2 bites. How can they eat so much at once? Xu Chengjun sneered and said, "Oh, then I want to see who is so bold that he dares to come to our Xu family to eat and drink for free." Li Xiaoyu was overjoyed and said excitedly, "Yes, yes, such people must be driven out." This time, she can finally let out this breath. She didn't understand that her breath was completely because she mocked Su Weifeng and others first, but she didn't let her mock Chen Ke come out. When Su Weifeng came to him, he didn't even raise his head and continued to eat. Li Xiaoyu immediately glared at him and said, "Boy, you are really capable. You actually got in. What did you apply for to get in? Haha, why don't you say anything? Are you feeling guilty?" "This is the young master Xu Chengjun of the Xu family. I don't know how you can pretend in front of him." Xu Chengjun said in a deep voice, "Raise your head. I want to see who is so brave." Su Weifeng then slowly raised his head and looked at Xu Chengjun. He was too lazy to even look at a woman like Li Xiaoyu. "Ah!" Xu Chengjun exclaimed. The Xu family can now have the current scale and has developed into the top family in Yangcheng in the past few months. It is naturally thanks to Su Weifeng. The Xu family has already passed Su Weifeng's image to all important people in the family, fearing that these people would offend Su Weifeng. Although Xu Chengjun had never seen Su Weifeng, he had already memorized Su Weifeng's appearance, so how could he not recognize him at this time? Pretend. Keep pretending. If you have the guts, pretend again in front of Xu Xiao. I'll see how brave you are. Li Xiaoyu said with a glare, and shouted, "Stand up." Su Weifeng still sat as steady as a mountain, and said to Xu Chengjun lightly, "Your vision is not very good." Xu Chengjun felt the sweat on his head flow out all at once. Su Weifeng, the Wei family was so powerful in the past, but because of offending Su Weifeng, it was directly destroyed in a few days. Now the Xu family has a good relationship with Su Weifeng. If he offended Su Weifeng and caused the Xu family and Su Weifeng to be at odds, he would definitely be beaten to death by his family. With a glare, Xu Chengjun turned around and swung his hands. Bang! A crisp slap sounded, and it was already heavily slapped on Li Xiaoyu's face. Then he kicked Li Xiaoyu again and shouted angrily, "Asshole, how dare you talk to Mr. Su?" He was really angry. This blind woman not only offended Su Weifeng, but also wanted to drag him into the water. This was simply unforgivable. Ah! Li Xiaoyu sat on the ground, covering his face with his hands. He was completely stunned and stammered, "Xu. Mr. Xu, why did you hit me?" "Hit you? I will kill you. Do you know who this is?" "This is Mr. Su, a distinguished guest of our Xu family. Who do you think you are? How dare you come to trouble Su Weifeng?" Li Xiao's eyes suddenly turned to Su Weifeng. He couldn't believe the reality at all. The person he offended was actually the person that the Shu family called a distinguished guest. Chapter 472. I want to marry you. Forget it. Today is Lingling's birthday. Don't shout and kill here. Su Weifeng waved his hand. Now this woman can't bother him anymore, and he doesn't bother to do anything to her. She is totally not on the same level. Xu Chengjun hurriedly said with a smile, Mr. Su, I really didn't know that she offended you. If I had known earlier, I would have kicked her out. Su Weifeng smiled slightly and said, everyone who comes is a guest. It's not the way to treat guests to drive Lingling's guests away. You go about your business. I don't feel comfortable eating with you here. Then Mr. Su, take your time. If you need anything, just call me. Li Xiaoyu looked at the posture of Xu Chengjun talking to Su Weifeng, and her face turned pale with fear. It's very simple. Su Weifeng has been sitting all the time, while Xu Chengjun is not only standing, but also slightly bent over. This clearly shows that he has enough respect for Su Weifeng, which means that this man who she thinks is a bumpkin is definitely much more powerful than Xu Chengjun. When she thought of this, she felt her back was wet with sweat. She turned over and knelt down, tears in her eyes, and made a look of great regret, saying, Mr. Su, I didn't recognize the great man. You are a great man, and don't care about the mistakes of the little man. Don't bother with me. Go, I want to eat. Su Weifeng frowned. Xu Chengjun immediately glared at him and said, why don't you go on? Can you be so stubborn with a person like Mr. Su? As he said that, he dragged Li Xiaoyu away. Su Weifeng didn't care how Xu Chengjun treated Li Xiaoyu, as long as this annoying woman didn't appear in his sight and didn't disturb his interest in eating, it was enough. Young Master Jin is here. Suddenly, at the door of the villa, with a loud shout, a high-powered Lamborghini rushed into the yard. After a beautiful drift, the car stopped, and when the door opened, a tall and burly man jumped out of the car. Jin Yuhu. Someone screamed out. The burly man laughed and said, haha, I left Yangcheng for so many years, I didn't expect that someone still remembered me. Xu Chengjun came forward, and a frightened expression appeared on his face involuntarily. He said carefully, Mr. Jin, you are the leader of the younger generation of our Yangcheng family. How could we forget you? When did you come back? Jin Yuhu looked Xu Chengjun up and down, and then slapped him on the shoulder. Xu Chengjun's shoulder tilted, and he almost fell down. He barely stood up, but he was also gritting his teeth in pain, but he didn't dare to get angry. Ha, you are Xu Chengjun. I haven't seen you for a few years. You have become a decent man. Xu Chengjun grinned and laughed dryly, saying, Mr. Jin, you came to our Xu family. This is. Jin Yuhu glanced around and said, I heard that Lingling has a birthday today, so I came to celebrate her birthday. Look at your expression. What's the matter? Are you afraid that I will cause trouble? Don't worry, I'm not an unreasonable person. Xu Chengjun's face was dark. This Jin Yuhu was from the Jin family, the largest family in Yangcheng. His family was strong, and he himself was strong. He was not only tall, but also practiced kung fu. He was a bully in Yangcheng at the beginning. Almost all the children of the family were beaten by him, but because of the strength of the family, no one could do anything to him. He has always been the nightmare of the children of these big families. This guy suddenly disappeared in the past few years, but the children of the family were all happy. Who knew that this guy would appear again today? As for reason, has this guy ever been reasonable? His fist is reason. Where's Lingling? I'm here to celebrate your birthday. Jin Yuhu shouted again. Xu Lingling came out, and there was a bit of fear in her eyes, but she still said, Mr. Jin, I really don't deserve your presence to celebrate my birthday. Jin Yuhu looked Xu Lingling up and down, his eyes shining, and said, Lingling, is this Lingling? You have become so beautiful? Xu Lingling smiled and said, Mr. Jin, I'm not beautiful at all. It's my birthday, so I asked someone to put on some makeup for me, and I wanted to take some photos to scare people. Haha, that's not bad. I like it. Come here. This is my birthday gift for you. Jin Yuhu took out a box, opened it directly, and took out a diamond necklace from it. Wow, such a big diamond. Many girls screamed in surprise. Jin Yuhu laughed and said, it's just a 3-carat little toy. Let Lingling take it for fun. 3 carats. And it's heart-shaped. It must be at least more than 1 million. Young Master Jin is generous. Yes, it has to be young Master Jin of the Jin family. Others don't have such generosity. Many people came to flatter Jin Yuhu. Compared with the Shu family, the Jin family puts more pressure on everyone here. Even if the Shu family has suddenly grown recently, it is definitely not as good as the Jin family in terms of foundation. Shu Lingling hurriedly said, "Thank you for young Master Jin's gift." Jin Yuhu laughed again and said, "Come on, I'll take it for you." Everyone was stunned for a moment, and all their eyes were on Shu Lingling. This kind of thing can only be done by very close people. Jin Yuhu's request at this time clearly has a deeper meaning. Shu Lingling took a deep breath, then smiled and said, "Mr. Jin, I'm sorry, I already wore a necklace today. You gave me this one, and I'll wear it later." Jin Yuhu frowned, stepped forward, and directly stretched out his hand to Shu Lingling's shoulder, saying, "How can this broken jade thing you are wearing match your status? Only diamonds can better set off your beauty. What's the matter? Are you embarrassed to be with me?" Shu Lingling took a step back, avoiding Jin Yuhu's hand, and said, "Mr. Jin, we are all grown up. We can't be as casual as we were when we were young." Jin Yuhu narrowed his eyes and said, "Lingling, it seems that you want me to say it out loud. Okay, then I'll announce it here." Glancing around, Jin Yuhu said loudly, "I, Jin Yuhu, announce here today that I want to marry Shu Lingling as my wife." The whole birthday party suddenly became quiet. Jin Yuhu's announcement of this news undoubtedly shocked many young family members here. The Jin family is the largest family in Yangcheng, and the Shu family is also very powerful. If the Shu family and the Jin family marry, it means that the two families will have more close cooperation. Then the entire Yangcheng will be occupied by these two families, and the interests of other families will definitely be squeezed a lot, and their living space will become much smaller. It seems that the Shu family has no reason to refuse. But at this moment, Shu Lingling smiled and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Jin, but obviously neither you nor I can decide on our own marriage. This matter still requires the elders of the two families to come and discuss." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 473 Arrogant Young Master Jin. There was nothing wrong with what Shu Lingling said. She didn't refuse directly, nor did she agree. She also hit the nail on the head. The marriages of the children of their big families were arranged by their families. How many people could make the decision? Jin Yuhu laughed and said, "What Lingling said makes sense. This time when I go back, I will ask my family to propose marriage. I don't think your Shu family will refuse." Shu Lingling smiled slightly and said, "We can't understand the intentions of our elders. Mr. Jin, there are so many guests today. If Lingling has any inadequate hospitality, please forgive me." Jin Yuhu narrowed his eyes and said, "Of course I don't care about this. Come on, let's talk about the marriage later. I'd better change your necklace first." Shu Lingling didn't expect Jin Yuhu to still hold on to this matter. This was Su Weifeng's birthday gift to her. How could she change it? "Mr. Jin, my current necklace matches my clothes very well, but it seems to have lost its charm after changing it." Jin Yuhu said nonchalantly, "Diamond necklaces can be matched with anything. No matter what kind of clothes, wearing a diamond necklace will make it more suitable. What's the matter? Can't Lingling give me this face?" Shu Lingling was in a dilemma. She gritted her teeth and said, "Mr. Jin, this necklace has a special meaning to me. Please don't force me." "Special meaning? Someone gave it to me?" Jin Yuhu's eyes flashed with a gleam of light. Shu Lingling hurriedly said, "This is a gift from an important person. If I don't wear it, it would be disrespectful to him. Next time there is an occasion, I will definitely wear the necklace that Mr. Jin gave me." "Who gave it to me?" Jin Yuhu's eyes were already cold. "It was a man, right?" Shu Lingling didn't know how to answer for a moment. If it was Su Weifeng who gave it to her, based on her understanding of Jin Yuhu would definitely make trouble for Su Weifeng, and might even fight him directly. She was not worried that Su Weifeng would suffer, but this obviously brought trouble to Su Weifeng, which was also very bad. Just when she was in trouble, someone suddenly patted her shoulder. When she turned around, she saw Su Weifeng and opened her mouth in surprise. Su Weifeng pinched her shoulder again, then looked at Jin Yuhu and said lightly, "I gave Ling Ling this necklace. Do you have any objection? Do you have any objection?" When these 5 words were spoken, everyone's eyes widened. This was clearly a provocation to Jin Yuhu. Who is this person? How dare he go against the eldest son of the Jin family? In addition to cooperating with the Shu family, Su Weifeng really didn't have any contact with other families in this city, so the children of other families basically didn't know Su Weifeng, nor did they know Su Weifeng's status in the Shu family. "Boy, are you provoking me?" Jin Yuhu was not angry at this time, but looked at Su Weifeng with a happy look of seeing prey. Su Weifeng's expression remained calm. He shook his head and said, "No, I didn't." Many people were speechless. He was quite pretentious when he appeared just now, but Jin Yuhu's words revealed his true colors. Jin Yuhu narrowed his eyes, stared at Su Weifeng, and said, "What are you thinking of doing?" Su Weifeng and Jin Yuhu looked at each other and said, "I'm just telling you that Ling Ling is my friend. No one can force her to do something she doesn't want to do." Jin Yuhu laughed and said, "Interesting, interesting. After not coming back for a few years, someone actually dared to confront me, Jin Yuhu, in person. Boy, I have to admire your courage." Su Weifeng said lightly, "I also find it interesting. In Yangcheng, there are still people who dare to force my friend." Xu Lingling's eyes were fixed on Su Weifeng at this time, and she was so excited. Although her relationship with Su Weifeng has become much better recently, it is just a cooperative relationship, a personal relationship. In fact, she knows very well that she and Su Weifeng are at most ordinary friends. But Su Weifeng actually stood up for her this time, and he was facing Jin Yuhu, the son of the largest family in Yangcheng. This really touched her, but this matter also made her more nervous. The Jin family is not comparable to the previous Wei family. The strength of the Jin family is strong, and it is not even weaker than the general big families in the provincial capital. It is really dangerous for Su Weifeng to go against the Jin family. A smell of gunpowder quickly spread, and everyone was extremely nervous. At this time, a car drove in, and then a woman walked out of the car. No one paid special attention to the woman, but Xu Lingling saw the woman, and was immediately surprised. She hurriedly ran over to greet her and said, "Xiaoxuan, you are finally here." Zhu Xiaoxuan glanced at her and said, "This atmosphere is so weird. What's going on? Is a world war going to break out?" Xu Lingling quickly explained the situation briefly. Zhu Xiaoxuan nodded, then came over and took Su Weifeng's arm, saying, "Mr. Su, if there is anything interesting, can you take me to play?" Su Weifeng smiled and said, "Okay, it's more lively when everyone plays together." Xu Lingling said to Zhu Xiaoxuan at this time, "Sister Xiaoxuan, this is Jin Yuhu from our Yangcheng Jin family." Then she turned to Jin Yuhu and said with a smile, "Young Master Jin, this is Zhu Xiaoxuan, the eldest daughter of the Zhu family in the provincial capital." Zhu family in the provincial capital. Everyone was shocked. In fact, many families knew that the Shu family had been in contact with the Zhu family recently, but they didn't know what the relationship between the two families was. And on Xu Lingling's birthday, Zhu Xiaoxuan, the most famous of the younger generation of the Zhu family, actually came, which seemed to have shown that the relationship between the two families was quite good. Another thing that surprised everyone was that Zhu Xiaoxuan actually took Su Weifeng's arm and acted very intimately. Could it be that this man was from the Zhu family? This is very likely. Only people from the Zhu family could not take Jin Yuhu seriously. Jin Yuhu's face changed, and then he laughed and said, "So it's Miss Zhu, I'm sorry." Zhu Xiaoxuan smiled and said, "Mr. Jin, you're too polite. I just don't know what grudge you have with our Mr. Su. Why don't you tell me?" Jin Yuhu laughed again and said, "It's just a misunderstanding. I underestimated the Shu family. See you later." After that, Jin Yuhu threw the necklace directly in front of Xu Lingling, turned around and strode away. Xu Lingling reached out to take it. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, she couldn't refuse to take it, which would be completely disrespectful to the Jin family. Chapter 474 I hope to see you when I open my eyes. Su Weifeng, Xu Lingling and Zhu Xiaoxuan came to the study room of the villa. Xu Lingling rubbed her forehead and said, "Why did this guy come back? It's really a headache." Zhu Xiaoxuan also frowned slightly and said, "This matter is really not easy to handle. The Jin family has been operating in Yangcheng for many years. Its own strength is comparable to many families in the province. In addition, it has close relations with the Liu family in the province. Its strength is still quite powerful. Even our Zhu family dare not easily conflict with them." Su Weifeng said with a little surprise, "There is such a strong family in Yangcheng." Zhu Xiaoxuan nodded and said, "In fact, the big families in our province are not only rooted in the provincial capital. Basically, every family has some connection with the subordinate cities. Otherwise, how can a provincial capital alone have so many resources?" Xu Lingling smiled bitterly and said, "That's true, so it makes me headache. The Jin family is more difficult to deal with than the families in the province. After all, we are in the same city and have too many intersections." Su Weifeng drank tea slowly, not interested in these, but said, "Where has Jinyu gone in recent years?" Xu Lingling said, "During the time he was away, I heard that he went to join the army, but later it was reported that he went out to make his own way. There has been no accurate news, but I feel that this time, after he came back, he felt even more terrifying. I didn't even dare to look him in the eye." Su Weifeng said, "He must have been on the battlefield, so there is a murderous aura on him." "Battlefield?" Zhu Xiaoxuan frowned and said, "Coming back from the battlefield, doesn't that mean he has been through some hardships and is more difficult to deal with?" Su Weifeng nodded and said, "Although he was still very arrogant just now and seemed to be the young master Jin in your eyes, I feel that he was just pretending. He knows how to advance and retreat based on facts, instead of just doing things recklessly." Xu Lingling said with a bitter face, "Isn't that even more difficult? What should I do now? Brother Su, Sister Xiaoxuan, you must help me. I don't want to marry such a terrible man." Zhu Xiaoxuan smiled and said, "You don't have to worry too much about this. Today I have made clear the relationship between your Shu family and our Zhu family. If your Shu family doesn't have such an idea, our Zhu family will also oppose it." Xu Lingling then breathed a sigh of relief and said, "That's good, that's good." Zhu Xiaoxuan chuckled and said, "When did Lingling become so weak?" Xu Lingling was stunned for a moment, then sighed helplessly, and said, "It should be the psychological trauma left on me by Jinyu a few years ago. This guy is too fierce and domineering. He always keeps his word. Almost all the young generation in Yangcheng have been dealt with by him. I also suffered at his hands at that time. He even doesn't let women go." Zhu Xiaoxuan frowned. Xu Lingling said a little embarrassedly, "At that time, I was always non-mainstream and fearless, so I had a conflict with him." Zhu Xiaoxuan smiled and said, "You have such an experience." Xu Lingling turned to look at Su Weifeng and said, "I changed since I met Brother Su." Zhu Xiaoxuan looked at Su Weifeng with a smile, waiting for his response. Su Weifeng coughed lightly and said, "My current image is better." Xu Lingling blinked and said, "Brother Su, I don't think Jinyu will give up. Today he said he wanted to marry me. If he just gave up, it would be a loss of face for the Jin family. Although the Zhu family and our Shu family will not agree to their Jin family, there must be a good enough reason. Just pretend to be my fiancé." Su Weifeng's face turned black and said, "I'm already married, and the Jin family can find out. Then I'll be your concubine." Xu Lingling immediately added. Su Weifeng glared and said, "Nonsense." Xu Lingling chuckled and said, "It was just a joke. I was too nervous because of Jinyu. I have to relax myself." Zhu Xiaoxuan also laughed. Today is Xu Lingling's birthday after all, so they have to go downstairs to greet the guests. The three of them came downstairs again. When they went downstairs, the depressing atmosphere brought by Jinyu had not been eliminated. Everyone wanted to know what Xu Lingling's attitude would be next. But Xu Lingling had returned to normal at this time and enthusiastically invited everyone to have fun together, which quickly made the atmosphere joyful. Su Weifeng and Zhu Xiaoxuan took some food and sat down to one side. The two chatted casually, looking relaxed. Many people still glanced at them from time to time. ZHU Zayaksan, the eldest daughter of the ZHU family. All the children of the family here hoped to make friends with ZHU Zayaksan. And Su Weifeng, the man who could sit and chat with ZHU Zayaksan, the man who dared to confront Jinwoo head on and did not take Jinwoo seriously, was also deeply remembered by everyone. Everyone went to the Shu family to ask about Su Weifeng's bottom line. But the Shu family kept their mouths shut about this matter and absolutely did not reveal Su Weifeng's true identity. This has attracted many people to speculate, and some even speculated that Su Weifeng might be a descendant of a big family in Beijing. When the dance music started, everyone turned their eyes to Xu Lingling, wanting to know who would be lucky enough to dance the first dance with her, which meant how important his identity was to the Shu family. ZHU Zayaksan chuckled and said, "It's your turn." Su Weifeng shook his head helplessly, stood up and walked in front of Xu Lingling, performed a very standard gentleman's salute, and said, "Beautiful Miss Xu Lingling, I wonder if I can have the honor of asking you to dance with me?" Xu Lingling put her hand on Su Weifeng's palm, with a bright smile on her face, and said, "Of course." As the melodious dance music played, the two danced gracefully. Xu Lingling kept looking up at Su Weifeng, and her eyes never left Su Weifeng's face. Su Weifeng made Xu Lingling feel a little uncomfortable and said, "Is my face worth looking at so straight?" Xu Lingling chuckled and said, "It's really more attractive the more I look at it. I really want to look at it like this for the rest of my life. If I can see this face every day, when I open my eyes, I will be so happy." Ahem. Su Weifeng coughed lightly and really didn't know how to respond to Xu Lingling. This was simply an obvious declaration of love. Xu Lingling pouted again and said, "I really envy Len Zhuangsun. She can be with you every day, work with you during the day, and be with you at night." Su Weifeng muttered to himself, "In fact, you also have such an opportunity." But he was immediately frightened. No, I can't let Len Zhuangsun lead me astray. Chapter 475, Suspicion. Su Weifeng danced with Xu Lingling and returned to ZHU Zayaksan. Before he sat down, ZHU Zayaksan smiled and said, "Why don't you ask me to dance with you?" Su Weifeng had to stretch out his hand and said, "I'm afraid that you won't give me face, Zayaksan. I'll be embarrassed." No, I won't give face to anyone, but I can't not give face to you." ZHU Zayaksan winked mischievously and held Su Weifeng's hand. After the dance, ZHU Zayaksan and Su Weifeng went back to sit down, and then squinted at Su Weifeng and said, "Brother Su, I feel that you are a little strange today." "Strange? How am I strange?" Su Weifeng actually felt a little guilty. ZHU Zayaksan touched his chin and said, "How should I put it? It seems that you are not so calm. When you looked at me before, your eyes were clear and calm. What about now?" Su Weifeng took a sip of red wine and tried to be casual. "Now?" ZHU Zayaksan stared at Su Weifeng's eyes and said, "Although your eyes are still clear, they are somewhat evasive. When you face me and talk to me, you actually have a kind of guilty look." Ah. Su Weifeng was stunned. Was he so obvious? ZHU Zayaksan chuckled and said, "Brother Su, do you have any thoughts about me?" "No." Su Weifeng denied it immediately. ZHU Zayaksan was stunned for a moment. She was just joking, but Su Weifeng's reaction seemed a bit big. Su Weifeng also realized that his reaction was too much. He laughed dryly and said, "Don't mind it. I have been a little paranoid about women recently." "What's going on? Can you tell me?" ZHU Zayaksan suddenly became interested. "Ahem, this, I married Qiao Yushan, but I have some entanglements with Zhuangsun, so I'm a little confused." Of course, Su Weifeng still couldn't tell ZHU Zayaksan the real reason, so he found a more appropriate reason to tell her. "Is that so? This is a rather troublesome thing. Matters of the heart are too complicated, and I can't give you any good advice. You have to make the decision yourself." Su Weifeng said helplessly, "Yeah, I just can't handle it well now, for fear of getting into emotional debt again, so I'm very scared of any woman getting close to me." ZHU Zayaksan smiled and said, "This is really a bit paranoid, but for a man as outstanding as Brother Su, it's normal for many women to like you. If I had known Brother Su a year earlier, I would have tried my best to win him over." Su Weifeng coughed lightly and said, "Don't make fun of me. I'm having a headache every day." ZHU Xiaoxuan smiled, then frowned slightly and said, "I've met Qiao Yushan twice recently. Sister-in-law is a very thoughtful person, and she is also very satisfied when talking about you. As for Zhuangxun, she should not be a person who doesn't know her own strengths and weaknesses. Even if Zhuangxun likes you, she shouldn't compete with sister-in-law. It shouldn't give you so much of a headache, right?" Su Weifeng shook his head and said, "This is what happened. I'm tormented in my heart. I always feel that I shouldn't be like this." He was referring more to his current situation. ZHU Xiaoxuan said, "Oh, then we can make a decision right away, or we can make a decision slowly." Su Weifeng shook his head and said, "Forget it. Let's not dwell on this for now, since we are out for fun today." ZHU Xiaoxuan was very tactful and changed the subject directly, talking about some things about cooperation. Su Weifeng didn't pay any attention to these things, but just chatting for a while now would divert his attention, so he just listened casually. "I feel that the Shu family will encounter some troubles this time. Do you plan to take action?" Su Weifeng said, "Are you talking about the Jin family?" "Yes, it's not just the Jin family. We also have the support of the Liu family in the provincial capital. The Liu family is no worse than our ZHU family. In terms of basic strength, our ZHU family and the Shu family are almost equal in strength to the Jin family and the Liu family. It can even be said that we are weaker." Su Weifeng said with a smile, "Miss ZHU, are you being too modest?" ZHU Xiaoxuan smiled slightly and said, "I'm used to paying attention to the strength of my opponents." Su Weifeng laughed, then shook his head and said, "If it's just a struggle for interests between families, then I won't participate." ZHU Xiaoxuan said, "I really don't want to trouble Brother Su with these things, but I'm worried that Jinyu may target Brother Su, and I'm afraid Brother Su will be involved." Su Weifeng didn't speak, but just picked up a crab claw and chewed it slowly. ZHU Xiaoxuan went on to say, "I really can't keep Brother Su completely out of it. I can only try my best to let Jinyu target Brother Su alone." At this point, ZHU Xiaoxuan smiled bitterly again and said, "Brother Su, what I'm most worried about is that without careful consideration, we will involve Brother Su in the family interest struggle, and then Brother Su will think we did it on purpose." Su Weifeng spit out the crab shell in his mouth, smiled faintly, and said, "You don't have to worry about this. I can still judge whether it was designed by someone." ZHU Xiaoxuan immediately breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Then I'm relieved." Su Weifeng looked at ZHU Xiaoxuan and said, "Aren't you worried that my judgment will be wrong?" ZHU Xiaoxuan smiled sweetly, with an admiring look in his eyes, and said, "If Brother Su really made a mistake, then we will admit it. As long as our ZHU family can do our best to have a clear conscience. What's more, I really believe that Brother Su will not be wrong." The two looked at each other for a few seconds, and then smiled at each other. It is indeed very easy to talk with smart people. You don't need to explain things too clearly. Everyone understands what the other person means. There seems to be some tacit understanding between the other two people. This tacit understanding makes ZHU Xiaoxuan secretly happy. "What are you talking about?" Xu Lingling ran over and sat down next to Su Weifeng, then directly took Su Weifeng's arm. ZHU Xiaoxuan chuckled and said, "We are talking about what is the best gift Lingling received today." Xu Lingling pinched the jade necklace pendant from her chest and said happily, "Of course it is the jade pendant that Brother Su gave me. No matter what other gift it is, it can't compare to the gift that Brother Su gave me." ZHU Xiaoxuan chuckled again and said, "Does that mean, even if Brother Su gives you an ordinary gift, you will treasure it?" Xu Lingling said with a beaming eyebrow, "Of course, as long as it is given to me by Brother Su, it is my favorite." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.